All right, welcome to the AHT Podcast. This is a podcast built around having meaningful conversations that are intended to just help guys become more capable, more competent, and more accountable as husbands, fathers, brothers, and leaders within their specific community. So I'll be your host, David Acosta Jr., and today I'm joined by Kyle Defoor. Many of you know Kyle, but we want to make sure that we introduce him to our crew. And just so you know, Kyle has spent a ton of time, a long time operating in training environments and live environments where performance really causes consequences. And that spans across the military, across law enforcement, civilian spaces. He teaches them all. Kyle's background extends into the highest levels of military special operations and even into the private sector, operating environments with similar standards when it comes to performance and consequences. Over the years, he's trained thousands of students and has played a direct role in how people approach marksmanship, combatives, and preparation for real-world application. Kyle's also been involved in shaping how certain tools and systems are used, from firearms to optics to holsters, and the skill sets that require the use of those things as they integrate. But more than anything, Cal spent a long time in environments where standards are enforced by reality, right? So today's conversation, today's goal isn't to walk through the specifics of Kyle's background, but more so to kind of understand how those standards are actually built, how they're tested, and what holds up when things don't necessarily go according to plan. Kyle, I appreciate you being here, brother.
Thank you for having me, man. And thank you for that introduction. That's makes me sound special. I don't know about that.
Kyle, if we can, I kind of want to talk about formation because every man's standards start somewhere. And long before there's careers, there are influences that shape how a person sees discipline, responsibility, and expectations. Sometimes they come from family, sometimes they come from mentors, and sometimes just from specific environments that they grew up in. So I'd like you to just think about, like, early on, when you think back on your early years, what kind of environment did you grow up in?
You know, I grew up born in the 70s. So I'm 50, heading toward 51 right now. I grew up in the South, and so the 80s, late 70s, 80s, growing up there. It was I guess I would quote unquote call it maybe the old South back then. So mom ruled with an iron fist, so to speak.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate even more now than I used to. And taught the rules that I think maybe aren't taught anymore. So there was a lot of yes, ma'am, and no, sir. You were going to church every Sunday, whether you wanted to or not. And family was we lived right next to my grandparents. Their farm was right next to ours. And, I would call it a classic, especially nowadays, a classic upbringing. So taught to respect your elders. There was a degree of patriotism that was always around. So yeah, I mean, I think most, anybody my age, you were born in the mid 70s, probably anybody can probably relate to that.
Mm. Yeah. So Kyle, like, growing up in that era, you mentioned some of the things early on that we don't do anymore. Just besides saying, yes or no, ma'am. What are some other things that you think had a significant influence from a cultural perspective growing up in that era, in that household, in that culture?
I think work ethic is subconsciously instilled into you growing up like that.
Yeah.
Whether that's pulling weeds or baling hay or picking crops or, any of that manual type labor, I think that was a very that was just the norm. It was not, it wasn't like I was the odd kid out. That's just the way it was. And, those are things that still to this day, I mean, again, I have the the benefit of age at this point and hopefully a little bit of wisdom. But I look back on my life and I go, well, I mean, probably a lot of the successes came from that.
Mm. So growing up, when we talk about expectations, like what specific expectations as far as like behavioral components or qualities or traits would you say were like placed on you from your upbringing?
Like I mentioned earlier, respect for adults. There would never be talking back to adults. There would never be, I mean, you could, I'm not saying, obviously you could, but there would be consequences. So, and then the same way with your parents. And I mean, our schools were even like that where I grew up. I think what do they call it? Corporal punishment, where you get paddling. I got paddled all the time when I was in school.
Yeah.
And the principal or the assistant principal or the coach who dealt that out calls your parents, and tells them why. And your parents don't file lawsuit against the school. I mean, in fact, most likely you're going to get it again when you get home, people can argue that. I know there's probably people with way bigger degrees than you and I will ever have, talking about the ins and outs of it. But I think for the most part, I think it was a very beneficial, when you look at what I did and the ages that I did it at, I think it definitely had something to do with helping.
Yeah. Who would you say was most influential on you as a young man growing up, as far as like what right looked like in relation to being a man?
There were a couple of guys in my, atmosphere there. There was a coach. He was my cross country coach when I was a junior and a senior, because I, decided to run cross country to get ready for the military. Excuse me. I had never, I was a sprinter, I was a 100, 200 yard guy. And then get ready for the military, I knew that I had to, you gotta run distance, right? And
Yeah.
that guy was looking back on it now, he passed a few years ago. Looking back on that now, that guy was very influential, because he seemed to always be making the right decisions,
Mm. Yeah.
I think my grandfather, my mom's dad. I wish I got to spend more time with him. He passed away when I was actually in the military. The first year I was in the military. That was a stoic guy. That was I believe he was born in 05, maybe 1905. So this is a guy who is already an adult by the time the Depression's hitting hard, and he, everybody talks about it, but he legitimately grew up in a dirt floor cabin, so watching a guy like that watching a guy like that, looking at his awareness of the world, especially after everything he's been through, I think those are a couple. There was another administrator at the school, a principal that, again, just one of those guys you look at, you kind of didn't want to let him down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He carried that air about him. And, the thing is when you're young, you can't figure out why people carry that air. Well, what is it? Why do you want to be like them? It's hard for a young person, a young man to do. And I think, you're older by the time you realize it. And of course, by the time I realized it, I'm not living there anymore. I left home at 17, and I was probably 27, 28 by the time I was like, you dumbass. You know what I mean? Yeah, what I would give to have any of those guys and talk to them about things, like things that you're going to experience as an adult. So those are.
If you can go back and ask them a question.
What's that?
Kyle, if you can go back and ask them some questions, what would that look like?
I think one of the things I would probably ask is, how valuable is an education? Especially the coach and the principal, because those guys, they had degrees, right? I think when you look at it as big picture, especially in those times, I think I would like to hear that from like to hear their opinion on that. I know what their opinion would have been. They'd have been like, you need to go to school. Um, and that would be one thing I would ask. Another thing I would ask is like how, when you have when you were raising my mom, or you were, and my mom was one of five. So, I would ask parenting advice, because I mean,
Yeah.
everyone comments at some point in their life, there's no manual for being a parent, which I think is somewhat comical. It's very akin to the military, even what we're experiencing in the military right now. We did write all the lessons down of the GWAT, but we're having to reteach them again. And it's like, and the funny thing is, we read the same lessons from the Vietnam guys, and they're half of them are the same damn lessons. So when people say there's no parenting manual, I'm like, well, why isn't there? Maybe there should be. So I think, like, talking to those guys about raising kids, talking to those guys about how to better yourself and set yourself up for the highest level of success when you're younger, instead of waiting to midlife to do it. Or, probably in my case, getting very fortunate that you can transition some of the skills you spent a decade plus doing into some type of job. Those would be the things I would ask. And
Yeah.
I would probably ask some marriage advice too. Just both of these guys. I mean, you're talking about like it was that relationship. I don't know how long either one was married. A long time, a very long time,
Yeah.
until death. I mean, so
Yeah.
that's another thing, is like, I think most of us get into marriage and it's learn as you go. And what a great thing if you could, hey, what can I do to be a better husband, right? And I think those would be some pretty key aspects to ask people like that.
Yeah. Agreed. It's like that old school wisdom that gets lost if it's not captured, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Now here's the thing though. I think probably some of that stuff was said to me. You know what I mean? If I strip the ego away, but I don't remember it, obviously. And I think my experience where I'm at right now as a father, sometimes the kids aren't going to listen. You did say it, and it's like they have to learn the hard way. So, it is a little bit full circle, I suppose.
yeah. When you look back, if you look back now, kind of like you are, when do you think you first started to really understand what like discipline and responsibility actually meant?
Honestly, in my life, because of where I grew up, you learned discipline on the football field.
Mm.
And it's not, sports has changed dramatically in this country. And I would just, again, dropping the ego, a 12th grader present day in 2026 that's a recruitable football player is so far ahead of a kid in the 80s or early 90s that it's ridiculous. Because of the knowledge, because of everyone understands how to train now, what to train, etc. Back then, it was more of in the South especially, and people from the South know this, where you're Texas to Florida, and up to Tennessee, you can cut a big square there. I mean, that whole area, and I was in the middle of it. And I mean, it was, if you look back on it now objectively, and I've told people this, and people think that I'm either bullshitting them or, I'm maybe making a joke. I 100% had football practices that were worse than some of the days training in the military.
Mm.
And, when you look at that mindset wise, or use the SIOC readiness formula with awareness, willingness, and preparedness, those guys, the coaches, they were preparing us for something, and then making us aware of discipline. You didn't know, and you did it because your dad did it, and his dad did it, and his dad did it, and all your buddies do it. And it's it was an interesting thing. Maybe some people watching this would not understand that, like, every male in your class was on the football team in some capacity. It didn't matter if they never played. That did not matter. That is how culturally inserted it was down there. And when you're, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and you're doing these practices, which, by the way, back in those days, there is no regulation. There's no regulation on hours. There's no regulation on time. And that stuff generally started in August. School started in September. To say it was year round, it wasn't quite year round. I think you basically got June and July off. But other than that, because we graduated in May down there, we started in September, graduated in May. I would tell you that discipline was learned there, and it was discipline that was learned because the tribe that you have at that time is all the people on your football team, and you don't want to let them down, because everyone from your grandmother to your aunt to your dad and mom and your sister and everyone is expecting you on Friday night to have some kind of performance. And I know that sounds very almost cliche, but I think anybody my age would agree.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you talk, I hear you talking about adversity, about pressure, responsibility, discipline, and then we see that in a myriad of different modalities, right? Or I should say systems, whether it's football, right? Sports, or combat sports, right? Wrestling, boxing, etc. How important do you think that is for young men growing up rightly?
I think it is wholeheartedly and without a doubt, it should be a requirement. So if you and I were going to write the parenting manual, when it comes to sports, or maybe the chapter is how to instill discipline, respect for others, it has got to be with the sports model. There's no other way to do it.
Yeah.
And I would go further and say that if I had to do it over again, I mean, I can't say this because we didn't have wrestling at the school that I went to. It did not exist. I didn't even understand that was a thing until I came to the Navy, because this is way pre-internet.
Yeah.
I mean, wrestling to me was Hulk Hogan. I didn't know what wrestling was. But, I mean, I met a ton of them in the military.
Yeah.
But I think wrestling is an outstanding sport, for a girl or a boy. We've got a tribe member right now who has a daughter who is a senior in high school, and she is a ranked wrestler in her state.
Yeah.
That sport is going to make that person dig deep. It's going to make them learn and develop skills that there is absolutely no way you can do without it. You cannot do it.
For sure.
And I mean, I definitely do not want this to sound egotistical, and I don't want it to sound like a bragging statement, because I would preface it with this. I would give all this credit to my wife. But both of our kids were Division I scholarship athletes.
Mm.
So now, we didn't plan that. That was not the goal. So I think that's part of it as well, is that we see a lot of what I call the travel team parent, like, my kid's going to be a major league, whatever, or NFL, that should not be the concern as a parent. The concern of the parent should be to put them in these sports so that they can learn to lose. They have to, that is going to happen, especially in wrestling. And they will learn how to work with others,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that is very overlooked in this talk of sports and the discipline that sports creates, and I would say the discipline that sports can create, you as the parent, you have to put some left and right limits on this. But having a kid that's coachable, to me, the greatest, again, looking at it now, the greatest compliment that any of these coaches ever gave us about our children, specifically now, I'm talking about my wife and I, is that your kids are very coachable. I mean, that right there is just like, you're like, my God, that means so much to me. And especially now, I wish it had meant more to me back then, when they were in school. I didn't, like, okay, thank you. I guess we're doing it right. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. And listen to your elders. But I think that's huge.
Yeah.
What I see nowadays, and I see it, guys on the range. I mean, you're mentioning like the people I train or numbers I train. I do train a lot of people. Currently, just because of, I've been very fortunate with some of the work that I am getting, in addition to the civilian classes. But I'm looking at somewhere around a couple of thousand people a year that I train.
Mm.
And in doing that, when there's always the time at the ammo table, loading mags, putting up targets, end of the day, cleaning up, going to dinner together. And you talk and you hear these younger fathers, and even, maybe they bring their wife with them to dinner or whatever. There's a lot of quote unquote protection. Like, I'm trying to protect this kid from getting their feelings hurt or experiencing losing or whatever. And I say, no, man, no, that's what you want. You want that.
Yeah.
You have to have that. So I can't emphasize that stuff enough. Even like, and so the next thing that comes up is, my kid's not athletic. Doesn't matter. Make them do it anyway.
Right.
And I would tell you, depending on the age, if you have to, hey, you've played this season on this team, I'll buy you, your little doll or whatever. You know what I mean? If you have to bribe them.
Right.
But you got to make them do that stuff. You have to, man.
Agreed. I kind of want to dive back into just the process, you coming up. At some point, right, every dude gets to a point where the environment that they were raised in essentially gives way to the path that they chose for themselves. For some dudes, it's, the path is clear very early on. For others, it takes shape over time. For you, obviously, that path eventually led into military service. So when did, like, the idea of you first being in the military, like, when did that first enter your mind?
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, it entered my mind because of football. And it's not something I've ever talked about before, because no one, these are not the conversations people want to have. People want to ask me about specific military things that I was involved with, or maybe a selection course I went through or whatever. objectively now, I was a above medium talented football player. If high level is you're going D1, to a major university, I was not that. I want to make that crystal clear. I was small. Funny enough, because I quit drinking, and coming up in 2 days is going to be my 1 year of sobriety. I am the size now, because I lost 20 pounds in the past year. I am the size now I was in high school. So I'm 5'9", 160. And that's too small, especially in the late 80s, early 90s. So I had a degree of success on the football field. And again, to make this crystal clear, the real only reason I had any degree of success is I was very fast. And the other 50% of me having a degree of success is I learned very early on, because I was small, that if I could deliver a hit instead of taking a hit, life turns out better for that split second. So I was playing varsity football in the 8th grade. And I know that sounds very odd. And it was. In fact, when I was in the 8th grade, I know that there was a lot of, can this happen? Is this like a legal thing or whatever with, the Alabama Athletic Association? So, you get done with junior high football, you only play 7, 8 games, maybe 10, something. And that season starts earlier. And so, you typically go and you sit on the sideline with the varsity for the last 2 or 3 games of their season. And, in practice, I started performing, I guess, to some coaches' standard. And, I played a little bit. And then in the 9th grade, after I got done with JV football, you wear your same uniform, you go and sit on the sideline, and you basically, with your helmet on, because back then you couldn't take your helmet off. And, you just stand there for 3 hours while the varsity plays. And I didn't stand there all 3 hours. I got to play. I mean, I did okay. I scored some touchdowns. I did this, whatever. So in my mind, I don't know how old you are in the 9th grade, 15 or so, in my 15-year-old mind, I'm going to the University of Alabama because it's only 45 or 50 minutes south of where we live. Tuscaloosa. I'm about no more. I think I'm about an hour north of Tuscaloosa.
Okay.
And that's the delusional fantasy land I was in mentally. And as the 10th grade rolled around and the 11th grade rolled around, and I started, not playing as much, I think a little bit of that was political. I was like, well, this is, clearly this is not going to happen. And zero scholarship offers. So, a D2 or a D3, hey, you can come try out for us, kind of thing. But, that's when I was like, well, fuck these people, I'll do my own thing. And so the military was in my mind, just honestly because of the Rambo movie. That's me. That's my generation.
Yeah, for sure.
So when I was in I think when you were, again, back then, I think I was in the 11th grade. You had to do this career day thing, like in the cafeteria. And again, people have to remember there's no internet back then. It's, everything's a letter or, whatever. So you go to career day, and the military people are all on one side of the cafeteria, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. I didn't know the Coast Guard didn't show up, so apparently they didn't care about us, or maybe they weren't around. And I went up to the Army guy, and he was unimpressive to say the least. And I said, I want to be a Green Beret. And he's like, zero, doesn't have any info on it, can't tell me anything about it, kind of deal. And I'm like, this guy. So, I mean, I'm just, I guess what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get into the mobile home industry because that's what we have in Northwest Alabama. We're the heart of it. We're where it started. That's where manufactured housing started. That's where, the famous Don Tidwell and the Alabama Flash and all that. And, that's what you do. That's what your dad did. That's what everyone's dad did. That is, so I guess, okay, I'm doing that. And as I'm leaving, I see the Navy guy, and he's got one of those little bitty TVs with the built-in VCR, and he's playing the Be Someone Special recruiting video. And I mean, I look back on it now, and I know what I was looking at. In fact, I know some of the guys that I was looking at. SEAL Team 1 in Vietnam, SEAL Team 2 in Vietnam, and I was like, "Hey, what's that?" And he's like, I don't, he didn't even know, you know what I mean? He's like, it's whatever, I think it's called UDT. Oh no, it's UD SEAL, here, it gives me like a pamphlet.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that book's pretty cool. So that stoked my interest in it. I went home that night. My mom had, again, we're going to sound weird in this conversation because we had encyclopedias, right? Because there's again, people can't wrap their mind. You have 3 channels. You have ABC, CBS, and NBC, and, then you have encyclopedia. So I get the encyclopedia, and I look up SEAL, and there's nothing. And then I look up underwater demolition team, and there's like a blurb, like 3 sentences in the encyclopedia. And I'm like, that sounds really cool. I think I'll give that a go.
Yeah.
And then I think it was that year, the Navy SEAL movie came out with Charlie Sheen. And I'm like, look at that, So, I researched as much as I could, which was very little. But you could call the recruiter, and I called Orlando because back then everything was regional. If you were from the South, east of the Mississippi, and from the South, you went to boot camp in Orlando. West of the Mississippi, you went to San Diego. And if you were Northeast or Midwest, you went to Chicago. So I knew I was going to Orlando if I went in the Navy. So, you pick up the phone, you press 0. This is a landline, people. This is not a cell phone. It's a landline. And the operator comes on and says, who can I connect you to? And I'm like, the Navy base in Orlando, I'm not kidding you. Or call them up and whoever answers, Seaman Smuckatelli, what can I do for you? And I'm like, hey, I need to talk to a Navy SEAL. And they're just like, they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I find out, I get info. They mail you a packet in the mail. And I waited, for however long, like every day, checking the mailbox. And finally, this little manila envelope comes. And it's typewritten out on like 3 pages with like a manila cover on it, and it's stapled in the corner. And it tells you what are the requirements, and it gives you a rough how to get ready for it. And so, I don't know, man. I got obsessed with it at that point. And I think a little bit of that is looking around, after that career day and realizing my dream at that time, my dream is not happening. And you also got to look at is 91 or 92, Alabama won the national championship. So now there is, you ain't walking on, the walk-ons are going to be, everybody's going to that school. So, I started hardcore, looking into that. I mean, to the point where I quit all my sports. Like, I didn't run track. I didn't play football my senior year. I didn't go on my senior trip, because I realized very early on that this is going to take a big commitment to try to pass this screening test, especially for a guy who's never swam before. So, I mean, I could swim, but I mean, not in a competitive manner. So,
Right.
So that's how it happened. I mean, basically, me having my head in the clouds about a sport and then it not turning out the way I wanted to, which was an interesting dynamic because when I announced to, my town of a couple 100, 2,000 people, whatever, that I'm not playing football anymore, it was like, what are you doing? Right.
Yeah.
And, but that's what I did, man. My entire senior year was nothing but, committing to do that. And, now knowing I'm not going to go to college, I already had enough credits to graduate. So my senior year, I think I had 2 classes in the morning till like 10:30 and that was it. And I'd already lettered in, I ran varsity track in the 8th grade, 9th grade as well. I had 4 varsity letters for everything by the time I'm a senior. So I didn't have to go to PE,
Yeah.
So I'm off by, 10:30, 11 my senior year, training the rest of the time.
Were mom and dad receptive? Like, were they
No.
advocating for it?
No, my parents got divorced when I was in the maybe, oh gosh, I'm thinking 9th or 10th grade, probably 9th grade. My dad went to move, he moved a town over. My mom had to sell our house, so we ended up, like renting a little house in town. So I went from being the farm boy to living like on Main Street. My mom was not thrilled about it at all. And my sister is about 8 or 9 years older than me. And my sister had already graduated college. And, she did very well, very smart. And so I think the expectation was that, I'm going to do that as well. And me telling my mom that not only am I going to try to go in the military, but I'm going to go try to do this wazoo thing that nobody's ever heard about. She was not thrilled. And my dad was more like, my dad's a very laid back guy. He's like, well, not a real high percentage on this one. So, have your shit wired, So my dad wasn't like, no, don't do it. He didn't have tears coming down his face like mom did, but he's like, I hope you know what you're getting into. And, my dad's famous quote, handle your shit. And I'm like, all right. So that's it. I mean, that's how it started.
So with that, what's young? How old are you now? 18, 17?
16 when I made that decision. 16.
So you're 16 years old. What do you like? What do you believe about yourself?
I would say nothing. I don't believe anything about myself. And if anything, I thought that I wasn't good enough because the reality now that you can't do what you thought you were going to do and what I had moderate success at. So I've never been probably, this might be odd for people. I've never been a large, self-confident individual. I really just don't think about that stuff. I am more like, if you're telling me what the standards are and I'll just get to where I can do that. And there's just mechanically, I didn't really, in my mind, I was like, well, if I can run this fast and I can do this many pull-ups and I can swim this fast, and well, then I guess I'm good enough to go. Right. I mean, it's probably naive, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that naivete, especially back then, is helpful for making it through places like that. Because nowadays, I mean, you can go on YouTube and you can get the entire schedule of the selection program. And now what's coming. When Bill and I went through, you have no clue. And so you're taking it literally whatever evolution they're putting in front of you, that's what you're doing right now. And I'm not worried about this afternoon. I'm worried about now. Um, so, that was what I was thinking. And a part of me too, I will say that, again, I would not, if you'd asked me this 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have even realized it. Now I wanted to get out of there, and I'm not bad mouthing the town, and I'm not bad mouthing the peeps and all that. I just, in my mind, I was like, I do not, I want to at least give it a try. What can I do to get out of here? You know?
Yeah.
Um, so, a little bit of an adventurous, spirit, um, which, I tell people nowadays, young people, I think that's important because you do not want to be 39 years old and doing the whole shoulda, coulda, woulda,
Right.
especially with things like sports or, anything that requires a young person's physicality and mindset, you know? Um, so
That's sure.
I would say that it was just more of that.
Did you doubt yourself at all? At any point in time, did you doubt that it would go through, that you'd make it?
Yeah. I mean, I constantly in my mind, I was like, as this thing is becoming, as you start to realize it's becoming reality, especially when you sign that paper that I'm going to the Navy.
Yeah.
And again, back then there is no, and again, the listener might not realize this. Back then, there is no contract for going to butts. That's not a thing. You're enlisting in the United States Navy. You getting to Coronado, California is all up to you.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the more you get into it, the more, back then at least, the more you start realizing this is a major gambit. So yeah, doubting myself. I mean, absolutely, because I'm a kid, I'm a scrawny little kid from Northwest Alabama, and I'm 2 hours from the next major city, from a major city in either direction. So it's like, yeah, you're thinking like they're probably not even gonna, they probably want kids from like New York or Miami or LA or some shit. You know what I mean? You don't know. I mean, and again, there's no internet. You don't, I guess this is, so yeah, I mean, there's doubts. I mean, but I think the adventurous spirit part and the part about like, let's just get out of here and see if I can break free of it. Those two things were pulling at me hard enough to where I'm like, I'll give it a go. But at the same time, I did prepare, very well.
This episode of the AHT Podcast is brought to you by Attorneys on Retainer. At AHT, in our defensive and our combatives courses, we often talk about the three components of responsible preparation and decision-making in relation to the use of deadly force in defense of human life. It's the moral component, it's the tactical component, and it's the legal component. Most responsibly armed citizens spend the majority of their time thinking about the tactical component while neglecting the understanding of the legalities that follow such an encounter. And the truth is, if you're ever forced to defend yourself or someone you love from such a scenario, the situation doesn't simply end once the threat's been neutralized. There are a myriad of potential consequences that follow critical incidents, and those realities should be considered long before the conflict ever occurs. So what should essentially be a post-fight consideration quickly becomes a pre-fight or an intra-fight consideration. And the problem with that is simply this. It ties up bandwidth. It makes you slow to make a good decision and or fast to make a bad decision. Real preparation is about minimizing any uncertainties before you're ever placed in a position where you need to make decisions under stress. And that's why we've partnered with Attorneys on Retainer. Attorneys on Retainer, AOR, provides responsibly armed citizens with immediate access to experienced legal representation following self-defense incidents. This helps ensure that you're not navigating those moments all alone. Because just like any other life-saving preparedness equipment or protocols, it's far better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So, to learn more, visit attorneysonretainer.us and use our code AHT to save $25 on your membership. So you're a young man, you enter the military. As you're first entering, what were your expectations going in?
Full Metal Jacket because that movie had been out for a little bit. I just assumed, and of course you get there to shave your head, yell at you and everything. And I mean, you know,
Yeah.
some people nowadays call it brainwashing, or I'm sure it is, but I mean, that's the person we need in the military. We need you to understand
Right.
discipline. We need you to understand orders, right? So, my expectation was, it's probably going to be something like that. Now, obviously Navy boot camp's nothing compared to Marine Corps boot camp, but, it was, I'll be honest with you, man, in some instances, to me, boot camp was very fun. Um, the food in Orlando was freaking bomber. Great. I mean, I was like, this is like, I mean, let's just be honest here. If you're in the military, you're getting fed and you got a place to stay. So we're like, life's not that hard. And you're getting 2 paychecks a month. Although back then it was like $300, so you're making like a whopping $600 a month or something. But, I thought the food was great. I mean, hey, here's another thing. Orlando's where all the girls went, and it's the only place they went. So, yeah, you're in military boot camp, but you're looking around as a 17 or 18-year-old and you're like, I mean, probably way worse than a college campus. Everybody's in some kind of shape when they're 18, right? And you're
Yeah.
marching around and doing, a couple of push-ups a day. Maybe you're running like a half mile or something. The Navy wasn't too big on that stuff, but yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, I was like, hey, looks like a pretty cool thing. This is not where I want to be, but
Right.
I understand I have to be in it now. And I had a good time there, I really did.
So Kyle, you move past boot camp, you go on to the next thing. How quickly did the reality of that environment begin to challenge those expectations you initially had?
When I walked into the quarterdeck, because again, there's no let me Google, or any of this. This doesn't exist. So when I left Orlando, my uncle had my mother's brother had driven my car down to Orlando for me, so that when I graduated, I graduated boot camp and I had to go to an MOS school. Most of the military calls it, maybe they call it an A school. I had, you have to have a job in the Navy.
Yeah.
And I went to that for, I think it was like a 4-week school, and it's right now. It's in Orlando. It's on the same base. So when I left there, I had my car. I mean, I got an atlas, like my mom and dad had taught me, and I plotted a route from Orlando, Florida to Coronado, California, and I drove out there. And I get there. You got a little packet, a little manila envelope with your paper orders in it. And it says report at no later than this time to, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. So I'm like, all right. So I get there, I report, and there is a man standing there. Well, I walk in and there's a student there. I don't know. I mean, I realized at the time it's a bud student on watch, and he is very tense. And I'm like, hey, I'm checking in. And he's very he's trying to stamp my orders very quickly. It almost looked like he wanted me out of there now. I thought that, I guess this is just the way it is here. People are very,
Yes.
that's the way it is. And I mean, looking back on it now, I know he was trying to save me is what he was trying to do. Because within I don't know, a couple of minutes, this dude walks around the corner. He's wearing a blue and gold and UDTs and jungle boots, and he has sunglasses on, which I thought, that is so bizarre. Why does he have sunglasses on inside? And he's like, hey, go get wet. And I'm like, I'm standing there in my dress uniform, that the Navy took however many hundreds of dollars out of my pay for me to pay for. And I don't know what this man is telling me right now. I'm like, I'm sorry. painfully obvious. He's a petty officer first class. I'm like, I'm sorry, petty officer. And he's like, go get wet. And the student is like, he's telling you to go get in the ocean. And I'm like, okay, why would I do that? It doesn't make any sense to me. And then the yelling and screaming begins, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, run that way, go over that big berm and get into the Pacific and come back. And I'm like, oh God, okay. This guy seems pretty serious. And so that's it. That was how I was like, okay. So my uniform's completely ruined. Gonna have to go buy a new one. And then I'm like, these people are pretty serious here,
Yeah.
Our day one, we did the PT test again. And that was when, the reality of, I would say that is the first time that I consciously understood how insignificant I was.
Mm.
Meaning that, you're the big guy where you come from, you're your little sports hero or whatever. And I mean, I'm looking at these dudes who are men. I mean, there's guys that are 26, 27 years old. And I mean, just, they look like, way, way bigger, way, way more shake than me. And, it was intimidating. Again, the self-confidence is probably, I don't have any, but I'm like, well, I'll give it a go. So we do the normal PT test, and, the instructors are very professional, and they're just like, hey, you need to do everything as hard as you can. There's no like, that's it. That's the instruction. We get done. They put us back in formation. We're all standing at attention, and they're like, hey, if we read your name, go get on this bus. So they read off a bunch of names, a bunch of dudes go and get on that bus, and the bus leaves. And they walk up, and they're like, all of those guys passed, but it's not competitive enough. And that was when I was like, holy shit. And then now the second guessing becomes like monumental. Now you're like, holy shitballs. Like, that's just, those numbers and those times are just, that's just to satisfy the civilian populace is all that was. And then, you start the program, you take another PT test about a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, same deal. They're like, hey, if we read your name, go get on this bus. And it just starts right then. And I would say since that day, everything in my life, even now, even with the shooting thing, everything has been, at the level of performance that, like, yeah, this is what everybody's expecting. And then we really want up here. So everybody below here, you're not worth it. You're a breadcrumb on the table, dude.
Yeah.
And I remember being very intimidated by all that, but,
What would that make you feel about you? Like, what did you believe about yourself, right? Like, you're going into it. Like, I'm trying to understand, like, the mentality as it progresses, getting to this stage now from where it started when you first went in. Like, this incident happens. What did that effectively change in what you believed about yourself?
Well, what I did start to realize is I'm like, well, yeah, I don't look like these guys, but I'm running as fast as them or faster.
Yeah.
I'm doing as many pull-ups or more than them. You know what I mean? I was never a lower scored guy. I was above mid. I mean, I was not high by any means. I want to make that clear. What it did, the intimidation thing was at first. And I think, again, that's because, you're 18. I've never been anywhere in my life. And, and now you're in Southern California. And what I started, I was like, well, I think I can do this. It appears as though I can do this. And, and then as we start going through the different evolutions, whether it's breath holding or whatever it was. I mean, I was fine. I was making it.
Yeah.
And I think for the listener, if you prepare as good as you can, don't worry about what the guy on the left and the right and the internet and Instagram is doing. You prepare as good as you can. Then you need to take risks in your life. And then once you see the reality of what you're doing, if you see a degree of success, that should give you the logic that you can do this, and it doesn't matter what you look like and all that stuff. And so by that period of time, I was very, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was difficult. I enjoyed the whole process, man. I was, dude, I never, and I don't, I talk to you like this because you're you and because this is tribe centric and we're not really, we're trying to set people up for success here in life. Dude, the quitting thing was not a thing. I was like, I'm not doing it. I mean, when people, do you think about quitting? No, I didn't ever. Like, no. In fact, I would tell you that once you see that, and it starts very early on, it starts the first week. Once you see that and you do see a guy who's bigger and stronger than you, and he looks like Adonis, and you see him quit, and you're like, all that did, man, that was the ultimate feed. It was the ultimate feed. Because and listen, that's what we're looking for. You know what I mean? You don't realize it at the time, but that is what we're looking for, the person who's basically like is getting more confident, getting a little bit angry in a good way, because he's getting angry because he wants to perform more. He wants to eat. You know what I mean? So I would tell you, like, people quitting the program, and you can ask anybody. I mean, like, I would say a high percentage, not all, but a high percentage of us, when you see people quitting, I'm like, that's great. That just makes me want it more. You know what I mean? Like, because, and again, that's the attitude we want. So it was, great time. And, Bill and I were together. So that was even funnier.
I can only imagine. So like you're around these high performers now, right? Like you're around high performers, and doing so tends to change the way like people think about preparation. Kind of like what you mentioned. There's like a realization of cause tying together with effect, and that competence isn't just accidental. It's usually the result of habits, right? Deeds, discipline, responsibility, and ultimately like the willingness to invest the time and the effort required into developing real skill. So as you spend time in those initial environments, right? You get out of buds, you start spending time in these initial environments. What did you begin to learn about how real competence is developed?
I started realizing that the guys who, I guess I would verbalize it like this. You start to notice there are guys who do the minimum to get by, which I guess isn't a minimum. It's the requirement. And then, you see a guy who is throwing up at the end of the run every time. And then you're like, I want to be like that guy. Maybe I can go a little bit harder. And I would say you learn that, you start to learn, like, maybe you ID somebody like that. But yeah, you start to see those people, and you start to realize that there's something else in you that you didn't realize.
Yeah.
And you might see that a little bit in buds, but back then when you got to the team, it was there were definitely things that were harder at the team. And now you're with men. You're with guys that are, excuse me, 40 or 45 years old, and they've been doing this their whole life. And I think that was another like aha moment where you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I thought I might be pretty good at this, but actually I might not even be performing the best that I can, because look at this guy. That's what he's doing. What do I have to do to throw up at the end of a run? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you wouldn't see that unless you were around a group of performers like that.
Right.
So that was another piece that I truly interesting, where
Yeah.
I was very taken aback by it, I think.
How would you say those observations begin to shape the way you approached your own preparation, your own training going forward?
Well, I wanted to be like I wanted to be like those guys. And you start looking around and you start to see how other people respect certain individuals. And anyone would tie the commonalities together, of why that person was so well respected and why they performed so high. And so, I tried to emulate those guys.
Yeah.
So I tell people, like, I don't think an 18-year-old is a grown person, anybody, even currently or back then. I think a man, you're probably, realistically, what do they say? 25 before, all the brain stops. It's in full development, I think, for men is the general consensus. And I would say that that's probably a pretty good number. 25, maybe 27, something like that. 28.
Yeah.
So when I tell people, like, I was raised by these guys, I mean, I really was. I mean, like, I was raised by these guys. And so,
Yeah.
it was, again, looking back on it, what a great benefit I had with that.
Yeah.
And, when I was 28 years old, if you had asked, hey, you want to get through buds again? I'd be like, fuck no. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, so I give a lot of credit to those guys, through my career. So all you dudes that are out there that were older than me, which was essentially everybody I ever served with, I appreciate it.
Dude, so when we did the class at 2 on Harleys, one of the things you said was, you brought it up during a lunch talk. You had said that developing real skill requires long-term commitment, right? Like being focused on the process itself, not the outcome. Just grind. What kind of mentality is requisite for someone to continue improving over time?
Well, I would tell you that it's the awareness piece of the skill you're trying to do, because there are so many aspects to awareness. And I think awareness is the hardest thing to teach. And what I mean is, someone might not realize that, I don't know, we got to give some kind of an example here. If we were talking about shooting a pistol, just having the gun in your hand, I mean, just having it in your hand and dry firing is, you're going to learn more tiny little things that there's no way you would be able to get if you're just going to the range and doing a shooting session. It would be impossible. And the dry fire aspect of that, and the commitment to that, and then figuring out, what, if I get rid of that extended slide release and I get rid of that extended mag release and I can grip like this now, really you got to have an obsession with it. And you have to have an obsession with every aspect of it. And a lot of people don't, I don't know that a lot of people aren't committed to it. I don't think a lot of people have the time for it. That's one thing. And so, when it's part of your job, I think if you take your job and you do that, you obsess over everything and you make yourself aware of every aspect, whether it might be, it could just be the logic versus the emotion of the equation. Do you really like that gun better, or you like it better because that's what the internet told you should like better?
Yeah.
Does it feel better in your hand than the one, you had before? Little things like that. I think that's a very, most people that are good at stuff, they obsess over all that. That's what makes them so good at it. I mean, Harley's a good example, right? I mean, that guy, when is he not training?
Right.
When does he not have a weapon in his hand? You know what I mean? It might be a stick, but he's got one.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and people go, well, I would like to learn to do that with sticks. Well, you're not going to do that doing it on Saturdays, twice a month. That's not happening. He walks around his house with that shit, like we all do. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sitting here with a blade in my hand right now,
Yeah.
I did a self-blade protocol.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that like a lot of people should, talent, what is talent really? I think a big part of talent, I mean, that's a broad stroke. That's a blanket term a lot of people put on it. This guy's talented. I'm like, he's talented, or he obsesses over what he's doing and he's figured out every niche about everything that can possibly be done about it. And
Right.
you're just calling it talent.
Yeah.
I think that's a very reasonable thing to say, because
Yeah.
everybody in the NBA is talented,
Right.
but there's only been one Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And I think, you take a hard look at one of those documentaries and you look at some of the stories and you're like, well, that guy, wow. I mean, he practiced all the time, constantly.
Yeah.
So,
Completely obsessed.
yeah, I mean, that has to be a piece of it.
So at a certain point in your journey, you end up making it to a place where you're working environments where top tier performance is the minimal standard, where
Yeah.
the weight or the gravitas of consequences are grave, to say the least. And there's like little room for effort, right? Or little room for error, right? That's where things tend to get clarified pretty quickly, right? As you progressed into those environments to that level, what would you say changed about what was expected of you?
What's expected of you is that you don't let down that place. And to do that, you can't let down the guy on your left and right,
Mm-hmm.
and the people that are in that tribe. And that's a different level, because all that is all the dudes who obsess over the thing.
Right.
And when you look at this historically, all it was a bunch of them got together and said, hey, like, what's up with that dude who never trains on the Saturday and Sunday? We're training on Saturday and Sunday. Not all the time, but sometimes, wouldn't it be great if we had our own thing? When you look back on all those old timers, that's how that happened. And so when you're at a place like that, it's a very vertical learning curve, and it never stops. And the guys that are there that have even been there a very long time, they keep making that curve vertical. And it just continues and it continues and it continues and it continues. And it's with every aspect of the existence of what you do. It's from the gear you're using to the food you're putting in your body to, are you, should you really be working out like that? Or if you work out like this, will it make you more effective operationally? It's everything, every aspect of it. And it's not an easy place to be at.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I mean, I thought it was, it was great. I mean, you know, I think at a certain level, no matter what you do for a living, and I tell people, like, you shouldn't look at us like we're not special. We just have an odd job. That's it. I mean, whatever your job is, there is probably an equivalent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would assume. I mean, I don't know,
Right.
everything in the world, but I mean, make something up, whatever it might be. If you're a stockbroker, I'm assuming there's a place where, like, you would want to go because you're like, this is where all the really good stockbrokers are. And I would assume when you get there, they do things different. And that difference is that everyone performs at a high level. And why do they perform at a high level? And if you start looking at it, it's because they have obsessed over every aspect of their work. And that's the reason they are where they are.
All right. I'd like to take a second and talk about one of our partners, GripKeeper. So their line of products are great for building out your dry fire practice program. Their trainers match the vast majority of existing setups and let you work real reps, draw, grip, trigger control at speed, etc., all in the comfort of your own training space. The team and I think it's a great supplemental tool for incorporating in your dry practice and just increasing the overall volume of reps that you can get. So definitely check them out. Go to gripkeeper.com, and if you make a purchase, take advantage of our partnership code, AHT10, to save a little coin on making your purchase. As always, we're grateful for your guys' willingness to support the companies that support us. Thanks. So like, you're here, right, in this place, surrounded by these top performers like you're talking about. What did you believe about yourself differently, if at all, once you got to that place as opposed to the progression prior to?
I don't know that I believed anything differently. I think once I made it there, the thought process is I don't want to let anybody down. That I didn't have that thought before. But there, you don't let anybody down.
Yeah.
Just try to keep up. That's a train that's moving, and it's never stopping. Yeah. It's not stopping for anybody. I mean, we lost 22 guys in one night, and that train still didn't stop. That place is bigger than you. You're a very small cog in it. Now, I would say there are people that you and I both know that were, I like to reference it like a spoke of a wheel, or like a wheel itself. Yeah. There are guys that are part of the tread of the tire. There are guys who are part of the hub. I was none of that. I was a thread of the spoke needle. I was one thread. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
But like, there's definitely dudes that are like that. But you're just trying to, and once you get all those performers together, all it does is it just elevates everybody. Everybody just keeps going. It just keeps going, and it to the point where, I mean, a lot of things get invented because when you get that many guys together, it's like, and there's a laundry list of stuff from the early 1980s to present day where, you're like, where did that come from? Well, I can tell you where it came from. It came from a bunch of dudes who were such high performers. They invented it. Yeah. That's what a special place, and what a honor to be a part of that. I mean, that's that's unbelievable.
Kyle, did it have an effect on your understanding of performance?
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, you know, that now it's like, you better go get the extra work in, you know, when your leader comes up to you and says, "Hey man, like, just so you're tracking, bro, like, I can't have you landing over there no more."
Yeah.
Well, and he's pretty serious. And you're like, okay. He's like, yeah, I think you need to, you're going to have to find a way to work on that, right? If you need more than what we're doing. Well,
Right.
you better read between those lines, dog, because he's like, um, that's the way it is. I mean, hey, I've seen some guys like, hey, you're shooting, like, that's not, I will never forget this one time. I saw a leader tell a guy, after a little training piece, and he's like, "Hey, that's not how we shoot here." That's what he said. And I was so amazed by it. There's no yelling, there's no screaming, there's no, hey, we're gonna shit can. That's not how we shoot here. And the guy he was talking to was heartbroken. He was like, he's like, I just let that guy down. Now here comes a little tribe, right? We're like, hey, bro, like, just we can shoot anytime we want. Let's just, like, I mean, maybe we shouldn't party so much. Maybe we should come in on Sunday, get some reps in. You know what I mean? Get the hat back up to speed, right? But yeah, performance. I think you start to see what's possible. Where if you're not around a bunch of high performers like that, you can't see that, and then you can't realize it for yourself. So I would tell people, strive to always be and go to those places in your world. Because I've had the benefit, it's mostly been, now my job nowadays, I know a lot of, like, real rock stars. I know a real, NFL players. Matter of fact, there's one right there, signed me a program. He was a wide receiver in the NFL for 10 years.
Right on.
When you see something like that in another world, like that's not my world. I don't even claim to be a football player anymore. I'm like, I really didn't play football. Not when you talk to a guy like that, right? But when you see that in person, and you're like, holy shit. And man, now I get it. I get it now. And I think like that guy has a couple of cool stories of the same thing. Him and I have talked about this a lot, and it's funny, I don't know why I'm thinking about this right now, but probably a couple of months ago, I texted him to ask him a question about, his time in the NFL with a certain quarterback. And he gave me the story. He's like, I'm a rookie. He was a wide receiver. And he said, like, the other veteran receivers were taping up a little extra before practice. And he's like, hey, you know what, like, what's up with that? And they're like, oh. They're like, you understand our quarterback's probably the hardest thrower in the league. And there is no soft. There is no go easy. Like, that's not happening. And he's like, he said it dawned on me. He's like, you're not in Division I college anymore, dude. Like, this is the real deal. And, so it's not just a military thing. It's an everything. I think it's fascinating. I've told the skateboard story to a lot of guys before, where I met some pro skateboarders, and, it was just by happenstance through a mutual friend, and they showed up to the restaurant on their boards. And I was very interested in that. Right. Especially in my life nowadays, these are the things that I try to, for like a conversation like this, you're like, man, does that, what can I gain from that? So, like, you're talking about this performance piece, and I've told this story in class many times. So the guys that have heard it, you can fast forward, I guess. I thought it was so interesting that they came to dinner on their board. And I was like, I just made a comment. I'm like, you guys ride those things all the time. And the look they gave me was very almost like, how dare you ask that? I mean, not they weren't being dicks, but they were like, they gave me a look like, yeah. And I'm like, huh, okay. Now I'm like super interested, right? And
Yeah.
talking to them about it, and they're like, well, the one guy goes, I don't own a car. And I'm like, get out of here. He goes, no, I don't own a car. If I own a car, I won't be on my board. If I'm not on my board, I'm not going to be as good.
Yeah.
He's like, this company pays me a lot of money, and that, like that. So when you look at that mindset, there's the obsession, right? He's always on the board.
Right.
In fact, if you want to equate that to shoot, he's dry firing constantly,
Right.
So I'm like, well, how do you go to the grocery store? And he goes, well, I have to go every day because I can only carry one bag. Yeah. And I like, that's it. That's the look. See, that's the thing. That's why I tell the story in class nowadays. I got to stop because I've probably told it too many times. But like, I did the same thing. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, that's a pretty big commitment. And he's like, well, yeah. So I said, well, like, how do you go do, like, you got to do a photo shoot in LA or whatever, right? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, how do you get down there? He goes, well, I rent a car. And that right then, I'm just like, wow. So it's not, it is, the performance piece is everywhere for people who are good at what they do.
Right.
But let's just be honest, a lot of people are going to do the minimum. I mean, you're not a bad person, but I mean, like, I don't think you're going to buy your way with gear or anything else. You're not going to pass, if you're riding your skateboard on Saturdays and Sundays for 8 hours a day, how are you going to even be in the same hemisphere as this guy? It's not possible, right, dude. It's impossible, So
yeah,
I think those are just a couple of good stories about like other industries or whatever, that you see that, with the performance level. And I would say
it shows the commonality across the board.
What's that?
As it shows the commonality across the board. The formula across the board is the obsession, the discipline, the commitment, irrespective of whatever sphere it is that you're working in.
Right. And I would tell you another one, like, again, I know a couple of professional, very famous people. If I said their name, everybody's gonna know it. Everybody's got their album. Everybody's got their songs on their phone. Well, you look at it, these guys, when you talk to them, dude, they were playing that guitar in the bar at age 28 every night, because that's what they want to do, man. And everybody's like, oh, this guy's a multimillionaire and he's this, that. And I'm like, yeah, but he didn't even make it till he was 32, bro. So, I mean, what is your commitment really? Because that in that line of work, maybe it's a little different nowadays because, again, people can get, you don't need a record contract now. You can do it yourself. But back in those days when you had to have a record contract to quote unquote make it, that's a big commitment. And, hey, sometimes you might do that and you might not make it. That happens.
Right.
That does happen. I think people should, instead of boo-hooing and crying in your coffee cup, you should probably look at it, at least I gave it a go. Because nowadays, it seems like a lot of people might not want to give it a go. They might be a little bit like, let's go the safe route,
Right. Right. So real quick, going back, right, like thinking back on the time that you were there, if you could have a conversation with yourself, just a quick conversation with yourself, back at that stage in your life, what would you tell him? What would you tell Kyle back then?
Being at that place?
Yeah.
Take a break. For me, too much, too soon, too fast. I would have said, take a break. Go do some shore duty. Go do shore duty for 2 or 3 years, chill out, and then come back. That would be my advice to me back then. But I was of the opinion that In them days, it was wide open throttle Kyle all the time in everything. And that's what I mean by too much, too soon, too fast. Burn out, dude. Just burn out. And hey, some guys are like, hey, I did it just like you, and I did 30 years. I didn't get burnt out. Rock on. That wasn't me.
Yeah.
That was not. I wish I had taken a break. Not a long break. I'm not saying didn't. I think if I'd taken a break, I would have probably pushed through and stayed, my full 20.
So it sounds like there's a balance between the obsession piece and taking into consideration, volume, right? Duration, frequency.
Yeah.
With the obsession.
I think that's probably the hardest thing to balance. And I don't think I don't think anybody you talk to is going to come up with a solid answer for that. You look at Tom Brady. Well, didn't he retire twice?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's just part of what you're going to see. You look at anybody in the MMA right now. What's MMA lifespan? 7 years?
Well,
maybe.
yeah.
It's just, that balance. And I think it's different for different people. I think if I had taken a break earlier, I don't think I would have ever gone there. My shelf life was probably not as long as some of my bros and some of the guys that
Yeah.
So I think everybody, and that's the interesting thing about hindsight, right? Is you can go back and say, well, I coulda, shoulda, woulda. I mean, I'm not upset with anything. I'm happy with how everything went. I was never a guy that wanted to do 20. The only time, and the reason I say that is that, I stay my full 20. Obviously you can look back on things and say, well, if I had stayed, I could have done X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, but maybe not. Maybe something bad would have happened to me. Something worse than what did happen to me. You know what I mean? Like, who knows, right? But so I think those are things that I would tell, my advice to people would be, don't live your life trying to modulate. I think you just do you. And that was me back in those days, man. Late 90s, through the early 2000s, it was either wide open or nothing. This is the way I was.
Yeah.
But if I could go back, I would be like, hey, bro, just take a 1 year break. Just a 1 year break. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Kyle, at some point along the way, you were exposed to something that didn't just influence how you train, but the way you actually think and the way you live, the way you problem solve. And in turn, because of your influence within this space, the industry, the shooting industry, it seems like it's also something that's influenced now how many people that you've trained in this space also think in turn. Me specifically, right? How specifically they approach problems and how they think, right? How they talk about training. If you recall, when I first met you, it was on the phone. Our team was looking for we were looking for a VBSS thing, right? Like, it's like, hey, do you do this? And you're like, yeah, I do that. So we get it set up, talking to the team, trying to get it all situated. And I was like, hey, man, you keep saying this thing called SIOC on your stuff. Like, what is this? And you're like, oh, it's a Filipino martial art, FMA. And I'm like, dude, I've done a few of these. Like, I've trained in Filipino martial arts for a bit, but I've never heard of this. And you're like, where are you at again? And I was like, Connecticut. And you're like, hey, you need to go check out Kevin Estella. That's how I met Kevin. And obviously, the rest is history from there. But I want to talk about SIOC specifically, right? Because this is the thing that I'm mentioning that you turned me on to. And that's something that seems to be very influential in how you approach the way you teach, the way you train, the way you speak. When were you first exposed to SIOC? Like, what stood out to you most about it?
First exposure around probably mid to late aughts.
Yeah,
is when I first got exposed to it. Well, I mean, the thing at first was, I guess what really kind of opened my mind was that everything I had done in my life successfully, I couldn't tell you why it was successful besides being obsessed, besides, doing it so much. And with SIOC, with first meeting Tom and training with Tom, he's like, oh, we have a formula for that. Look at this. This is what you're talking about. This right here. This is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's actually what you did. And I'm like, well, yeah, that is what I did. But I didn't know I did it because I didn't have a formula for it. So I was like, wow, what else you got formulas for, And, I was a little bit blown away. And, in that I was blown away, and I was like, well, how come people don't know who the fuck you are? Like, that's bizarre to me. Like, obviously I know people that can use this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a formula for something, well, you're going to be better at it. And look, shooting is a great example. There are a ton of good shooters. There were a ton of good shooters in the 70s and 80s, right? The guys who invented USPSA, IDPA, the IPSC, the steel shoots, etc. If you've ever talked to any of those guys and talked to them about how they trained, they essentially just shot the stages and the tests they were going to shoot over and over and over and over and over and over and over, which definitely is a way to train. But they really didn't. Now, some of them would make stuff harder by making the target smaller, further distance, etc. But like when you, like a guy like that, and you talk to that guy and you go, what if you did this? And they're like, holy shit, wish I'd had that in 79. You know what I mean? Or whatever. And, that was just amazing to me. So to me, that was the thing with SIOC that I was like, huh. Now the blade thing to me, foreign, in the aspect of, and I say that now, and I'm approaching 20 years of being a SIOC guy, but, to me, I was like, blades. I was like, ooh, I don't, like what? Yeah. And the thing is, I always carried a blade, right? In the military, every soldier does.
Right.
I didn't know what I was doing with it. I didn't even know how to handle it. I didn't know anything about it. So I had a little bit of a fighting background, mostly BJJ. And, that definitely helped me, kind of quickly get to where I'm at. But, I would tell you this. I would tell you that, SIOC is the closest truth for combatives that there is. And I mean, we didn't invent everything. We stole stuff from this place and that place, and et cetera. The blade work itself, I don't know how deep you want to go into that, but I think most people understand what a piece of power that blade is, especially after they train it a little bit. And the formulas and the I would say specifically the readiness formula, which of course, back in the day, because I did that TV show, was always quoted as the mindset formula. That's massive. And that's how, if you want to talk about present day, that's how I quit drinking. I use the readiness formula. But I was just, I think it's, SIOC is like the best kept secret in this industry. And I say that, and here's why I say that. Because what happens is the amount of people we've trained at this point that are very, very famous and very, very successful. And they have, I don't know, whatever, 500,000 or 1 million followers. The reason SIOC is the best kept secret is all those people have a very hard problem telling everyone where they learned all that from. And that speaks volumes to how good that organization is.
Yeah.
When you think about it, I mean, at this point, I would say most people do realize, because they're like, most people with any half a brain will go, wait a minute, this guy is saying this, but Tom Kyer and Kyle were saying this in 2008.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. And that guy, like, he wasn't even in the military in 08. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think most people can put it together at this point, but that's why I say it's the best kept secret, because it's so powerful. A lot of these formulas that the SIOC clan did invent, they've been doing them since the freaking 60s. And
Right.
these people realize how powerful it is. And they, a lot of them have tried to be like, well, we'll just market it as ours. And, the thing that we say to everybody, and I used, I would, especially when I first got into SIOC, I was not the Kyle I am now. I was, that was very wide open Kyle. And
Yeah.
that was Kyle with a very, very, very low level of hesitation and a very high degree of skill. And I was good with testing that at any time, anywhere. And, I am not that person anymore. But back then, Tom would pull me aside and be like, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, oh, it absolutely matters. Like that dude's stealing our shit, and he's like, nah. And so obviously he's showing me another formula,
Yeah.
and he's like, no. And one of the best quotes I've ever heard from him, we always say the best quote from Tom Kyer. And then you're like, well, actually, no, I got a better one.
There's another one.
I mean, there's a freaking book album. He goes, hey, man, the truth belongs to everybody. Lies belong to the individual. And he did his normal thing. He turned around and walked away. And I was like, huh. Well, okay. That's pretty true. You know what I mean? And so that's why I say it's the best kept secret. The influence, I think at this point, obviously we can't talk about all the influence because there's definitely things that, the public doesn't need to know about, but it's mind-boggling to me. It is absolutely mind-boggling. I probably get a DM or an email, I would say an average of 2 to 3 times a week of a guy who I've trained, thanking me for, whatever. And I always remind them, I'm like, hey, just so you know, man, that ain't me. That's the tribe.
Right.
So,
Right.
that was my thoughts when I first got into it.
Yeah. Attribution is a huge thing. How would you say, in what way, how has your, instruction, development, influence from SIOC, how has it changed the way you are, affected the way you develop curriculum when you're training people?
Well, I would use the awareness block again of the readiness formula, because one of the things that's in the awareness block is logic versus emotion. And I 100% train off of logic.
Yeah.
So I've always done that. And I think if you use that, it might not be the most popular thing, and it might not get you, what people want nowadays. They want clicks and they want follows. It might not get you that. But what it is going to get you, if you are obsessed with this job and you want to be good at it and you want to do all the little things to make yourself that good at it, it's going to get you, what is the job? The job is to make the student better, both speed and accuracy wise when it comes to shooting. And I go one more than that. The job is in my opinion, not everybody shares this opinion. I get, you know, I get labeled that I'm giving too much stuff away, but I teach them how to train themselves.
Yeah.
So when they leave a 2-day class, they, as somebody told me, they're like, dude, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. Like, what, you're giving them all the secrets. Well, I mean, once again, truth belongs to everybody, doesn't it? So, and I'll say, by the way, I have not seen that. The classes are still full. So,
Yeah.
but I think that is using logic instead of emotion in training. And I would tell you the other thing, I really base every class I do, whether it's, I just got done with night vision, pistol. I'm doing some recce stuff for the military coming up tomorrow or the next day. I use the fighting triangle that SIOC developed, the time, force, and space triangle. You can actually use that as an instructor just to teach. If you think about it, what you're doing is you're teaching. If we just take shooting as a generality, I'm teaching them how to steal time back from the event with the gun that they have, whether it's pistol or rifle, and any kind of movement they might do, right? I'm teaching them to use the space available to them. And of course, it's either with a bullet, their hands, or a blade. I'm teaching them force. And so I just always keep that triangle in mind when I teach with logic. I mean, it's as simple as that. That's all I do. I mean, as I tell people, this is, well, maybe it is. Maybe it is difficult for some people. I can understand that. But using those formulas, it shouldn't be difficult. Now, if you're wanting to like hide the stuff and keep it to yourself and, and all that, I mean, yeah, it could be hard because you're trying to teach somebody something, but you're not really trying to teach them something.
Yeah. It's when you understand specific formulas that are essentially working as universal truths, you see the ability to have it apply across the board.
Right.
Like you just said. And that's a huge advantage when you have that, right? Versus trying to figure out yourself.
Well, it's just like
when
those guys we were talking about, those shooters back in the day, or me making it, being successful. I mean, the ultra marathons, when I used to run ultra marathons, I don't, again, I wish I'd had the freaking formula before I started. That'd been a lot. I'd have saved a lot of pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So you started in the training space. Like, when did you first? What year did you first get into the training space?
2004. I got out of the Navy and went to Blackwater.
So definitely one of the OGs in the training space, right? One of the first guys.
I'm the old man now, I guess.
So when you look at that, like, I see that anybody being honest realizes that you've been instrumental in the spread and the influence of SOC specifically, but changing the way training is looked at from a practical perspective. How have you seen it shape how people train, how they develop, how they teach, how they develop products, and just approach problem solving as a whole in light of that?
I've seen massive successes. I've seen entire units in the military almost do a 180 performance wise. It's and I appreciate that compliment. That's very kind of you to say.
It's just the truth, dude.
I mean, I've been fortunate. Here's what I tell people too, man. When you've been doing this as long as me, I mean, you're bound to have some successes, right? Blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. I think a lot of it, man, like, I guess to answer your question about how I'm seeing it nowadays, I do see a lot of things getting regurgitated, which is interesting. you know, when I say that, it's like, what's a good example of something like that? Well, I think the whole, like, it seems to be the flavor at least. Well, maybe it's dying down a little bit, but like maybe the last 2 years, everybody's like, if you don't compete, you're a piece of shit, and all that. And it's like, yeah, but we were trying to say that at Blackwater back in the aughts, and everybody told us we were crazy. You know what I mean? The number of now I will granted we were all doing IDPA because it was easier based being where we were to get to matches. But even before that, I was still doing rifle comps because when I went to sniper school, you had to do 2 NRA or CMP rifle comps to graduate school.
Really?
Yeah, they don't do it anymore, but you didn't have a choice, man. Like they were like, you're like, well, where am I going to go to the match at? And they're like, conveniently, we're going to have one on this base next Saturday or whatever. You know what I mean? But like you didn't have a choice. I mean, it was like, so it's interesting to see the whole thing now with the internet where people come back around and they go, oh, you don't compete or whatever anymore. I'm like, well, I don't compete anymore because I don't want to. I'm not interested in it anymore.
Yeah.
But I was a master class before you were born. But you know what I mean? Not that hey, look, we do the competitions. Like it's more like we do, we'll set up stages, right? Like during the week for the military guys or whatever. And also just the shooting tests. I mean, all the shooting tests that I have are competition based. I mean, I don't use any targets besides a USPSA target and a NRA bullseye. That's only 2 targets I use. I don't use anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, even when I do CQV, I only use brown side out, white side out. I mean, like I don't, make it easy.
Yeah.
So like I would say now more than ever with my own stuff, I've made it. If you look at the hit ratios, like the number of alphas that I'm requiring for guys to pass some of the pistol and rifle tests, I do it on part-time because it's just easier for guys, and especially when you've got a 15 or 20 man unit, right? It's easier to run part-times than hit factor. That's just a time thing. But when you look at them, if you break them down, they end up being essentially high A class, standards. Maybe some of them are edging on master class. And I think that is a very good spot for people to be.
Yeah.
In fact, I had, when I was in Idaho, was it Idaho or a couple of weeks ago, either Idaho or South Carolina, I had a GM and a M in class, and it was interesting. Actually, no, I take that back. It was Bethlehem. I had a master class, a Caryoptis guy, and he had never trained with me before. And I was explaining to him, and he's a cop, and I was like, hey, if you break this down for your guys, this will end up being, essentially high A class, which, is very good. I mean, edging on master. Yeah. And he was like super stoked with that because now, see, he can take those things back and they're easier to run because they're faster. We just have parts on, right? Based off, target distance and difficulty. But I think that's one thing, like you see that's one thing that kind of got regurgitated, which is semi-funny.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then a lot of the things come back around. I mean, the whole red dot on the pistol thing. I mean, we were trying that in the early 2000s. Of course, there was nothing that would work very well, and there was damn sure nothing diveable. There was a lot of things. You look at the trainers that we brought in to teach us, and it was either Rob Latham, Jerry Barnhart, Todd Jarrett. Those were the big 3 all the time. Yeah. Of course, John Shaw back in the 90s. So I don't think that's not really something new. I think it's definitely something that people like to, banter about online or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I see nowadays. Like there is some definitely some, full circle kind of things.
Yeah.
hey, LPVOs are the way to go. Well, like, yeah, man, we were putting scopes on fixed carrying handles in 1996, 95. Actually, I mean, a few of the guys did it in 92 and 93, famously. So, I mean, none of this is really that new.
Yeah.
But like, hey, that's part of awareness too, isn't it? Right? You know, studying, researching, finding out, and that's fine if a lot of people don't do it, but I think, make sure you do understand sometimes who you're talking to.
For sure. For sure. So Kyle, at a certain point, like it's obviously just no longer about what works for just you, right? It's about whether you can take that information that you've earned and developed over time, that you've learned, and having the ability to transfer it to others. So like teaching. So when you're working with students, like what is it specifically that you're looking for early on to kind of understand where they're at as a coach?
I mean, I used to give a shooting test at the beginning of the class, and I would base everything off the majority.
Okay.
And I quit doing that because what I found out is that if I teach a certain way, I can give the individuals their own left and right limits, and they can kind of figure this out on their own. That saves a lot of time, because running a shooting test at the beginning of a class my goodness, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
And then you might always have a safety issue there, depending on someone's experience level. So I can generally tell, by how I start training, because the way I start and the way I do the fundamentals, I do kind of let the reins off at first, and they're kind of doing their own thing, quote unquote. Again, I give them some left and right parameters, and from there, like I said, I kind of start adding these different concepts to where they're doing it very individually, and different individuals hit different metrics at different times, and that's fine, because that's how I set it up. And then at a certain point, I bring everybody together, and now we start kind of like, okay, this is the point of performance. We want 10 rounds in the A zone from this distance at this time, or we want a bill drill from concealment at this distance at this time. And now it's 100% like outcome based for everybody. And I make those standards, obviously, they're not layups. They're not easy. So that's kind of how I roll through it.
Okay. So once you identify kind of like where they're at, how do you determine what actually needs to be addressed first?
Well, it depends on the gun, but universally, by me watching a guy shoot 100-ish rounds or so, that'll determine. And again, I'll use the entire class. And if I've got 12 students and 8 of them, this is the problem, then that's the first thing I'm going to hit. Yeah. And if it's half and half, if 6 have this problem and 6 have this problem, although I've never seen that in 20 plus years, it's usually universal.
Yeah.
I would pick the one that I know is the most critical. So for handgun, that would be grip. And for rifle, that would be standing position and how you connect that rifle to your body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's every class is different, and I think that's one thing. Even the interwebs will tell you. Like I've never ran the same class twice. I've never done that in my entire life, because you get different people.
Yeah. Right.
And even on the military side, everybody's like, "Well, you train this unit and that unit, and aren't they all the same?" I'm like, "Hell no, they're not." And even if they are, the crew that you get in June in North Carolina is going to be different than the crew that you get in January in North Carolina.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's like the weather's a modifier, any modifier. I mean, and I can typically look at a range, especially if I've never been there before, And I can tell you probably with about a 75% certainty which fundamental is going to be the first one or the one that's the most important for them to work on based on where the sun's coming up.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
for sure.
I mean, you get an East Coast range facing the ocean and the sun's in your face for 2.5 hours. I mean, dude, like that should be a layup for an instructor. And then, you go where I was at in Idaho 2 weeks ago, where the sun is, the range was actually built correctly because the sun was behind us all day.
Right.
And so my Lord, you can read where the target was made at 25 yards. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can read the address from the target company. I mean, it's like, that's going to be a different, vision for those two people is going to be different. And I think I've always suggested to other instructors, you really need to get on that program instead of having like a laundry list. Like, I'm starting with this, and at 8:30 I'm doing this, and at 10:05 I'm doing this. That is not gonna work. I mean,
It's like a chef that could do farm to market or farm to table, right? Like farm to table
yeah,
style cooking or farm to table style, the menu, right? Like the students are essentially the ingredients. The range is essentially the kitchen you're cooking in.
yep,
And depending on those two factors kind of dictate what's going to be put on the menu that day. If we're not doing a cookie cutter, like you said, 8:30 to 9:30, we're doing this. 9:30 to 10:30, we're doing this,
and that I would say this, like, excuse me, that's the reason I'm able to get so much stuff in, because like I just had the guys in PA. They told me I cannot believe we shot 600 rounds the first day.
Yeah.
And you did this, that, and the other. And I'm like, yeah, but that's just because, and one of the guys, he teaches at his unit. And I said, well, look, here's the thing. You understand why I did it like this and why I set the targets up like this. I set them up like this because we can run the final 3 drills of the day with the exact target array. All we got to do is paste them. And, he wanted to do it in an order which I would say is the internet correct order of teaching what we were doing. And I'm like, yeah, but how long is target paste? You tear them down and put them up for freaking 13 or 14 guys. How long is that going to take? And you got to move the cones. I said, I can tell you how long it's going to take, dude. It's going to take 25 minutes. If you use a stopwatch, it's going to take 25 minutes. If you ask the guy helping you how long it took, he'll tell you 10, but it took 25. You know what I mean? And those are the things like I already know the answer to all that. It's kind of like when we do combatives, we always do combatives at the beginning of a day, usually day 2 on a 2-day class, because, well, first off, the gun hasn't been shot yet. So depending on what we're doing, we don't want live ammo or guns anywhere near the area. And on the rifles, we take the bolts and the charging handles out. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we damn sure don't want that thing to still be hot, because guys are grabbing it and stuff. So I think there's definitely guys, and I see it on Instagram all the time, where it, I can tell what time of day it is because like they're on their range, and I know that range, and I'm like, it's afternoon, it's after 12 p.m. there. And why the fuck are they doing this on day 1 at freaking after 12 o'clock? It makes no sense, right? It's like something, now the student's tired as hell. It's probably 400 or 500 rounds into it, or 200 or 300, depending on who you are. But all those are things that, there's your example of like obsessing over it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When you can tell what range they're on, right? Yep, that's that range. And they're doing that at this time of the day based on where the sun's rising and falling.
Yeah.
That means you've got some reps on it. What's something that you see students consistently struggle with that you think slows them down more so than they actually realize?
High mounted optics on a rifle. It's mind boggling to me. I can't. I've tried to understand it, and I can't get anybody to explain it to me. I can't get anybody that actually, can give me reasons or give me data to prove to me why you would use it. Everybody I've ever seen is slower and less accurate. Now, they might be slower by 0.05 or 0.15. They might be less accurate by, an eighth MOA or a quarter MOA, but they're still less accurate and slower.
Yeah.
To me, that's probably the biggest thing in the industry right now that is, and I want to make, I'm using this term as like a motorhead, a Harley guy. You're retarding your engine. You're not advancing the engine. Your timing is off. It's just it's an amazing concept. And again, I just had it, I came home yesterday or, early this morning. I rode back from Bethlehem. I told the guys in the class at the beginning, I said, look, man, now I don't know why we had so many high mounted optics. But when I look at a dude's rifle, I can tell you how the performance is going to go. And because we had so many, in fact, I even had a guy who sent me a DM because he had taken a picture of me and he's like, hey, use this or whatever. He's like, what was up with so many high mounted optics? I'm like, I don't know, man. Just the nature of what it was that day. Who knows? But I told those individuals, I said, look, this is at 8:02 in the morning. I'm like, look, make sure you guys have realistic expectations for speed and accuracy because it's not going to happen for you. And they're like, I do it all the time, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well then I apologize. I'm mistaken, but I was not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then, the frustration kicks in and it's difficult at that time. That's why I always try to preload that because the frustration kicks in. And of course, instead of a logic versus emotion thing or a logic thing, it becomes an emotion thing. And then, it's like, well, my ammo or my freaking, what, and I'm like, no, Brett, like, look, it's just not going to happen for you.
Yeah.
So that's probably it. I mean, that is by far, it's crazy.
What do you think about it from a, less from a technical equipment perspective, but more so from just a software perspective, less hardware, software?
Well, a lot of it is, unfortunately in the past 10 years, the firearms industry has been the victim of what a lot of other industries have been the victim of. And what that is let's use the firearm industry to sell our wares. Whether that's a t-shirt or a pair of socks or whatever, I've given this analogy before. I can tell you what it ain't shooting performance.
Yeah.
And I think, when you can have marketing teams that make these really cool videos and they look awesome, man. It's like, I'm like, hey, that was better than what I watched on Netflix last night, and these people are influenced by that.
Yeah.
I think that's the software problem. It's I like this guy or I like this guy's story or I like whatever. And I've never been like that. I've been very data driven. Either it's faster and more accurate or it's not. I tell people this job, if you look at this job that I do on its face, it's not that hard. Because look, it's not like I have to decide what fund to put your money in. That's not what I'm doing. I don't have to go do a bunch of research and figure out what am I going to tell David to do. Here's what I've got to do with David. Make David faster so his vision needs to be a certain way so he can shoot faster. and he needs to do certain things with his firing hand to be able to shoot faster. And then I need to make David be accurate with those shots.
Yeah.
So the job is not the concept of the job and what it is easy. Now, to do that, I'll admit, yeah, there's definitely some quote unquote tricks of the trade to do this. But rarely is gear gonna make that big a difference unless you go something so odd like that, to where now your fundamentals, they can't be there because you've put yourself in a position to where you actually can't make fundamentals. It's like, but I always bring it back to, like, why do they have it to begin with? And that's what I'm saying. No one can ever verbalize to me that. I find it, that's the part I find fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. It's a very interesting thing.
You've got a very identifiable style of teaching, right? What have you found actually helps the students retain, not just apply, but retain what they're actually learning in your classes?
Write down the greatest hits. I do it on the back of a USPSA target, on the white side of a USPSA target, and I staple it up. And I tell them, I show it to them at the beginning of the day one, and I'm like, at the end of the day today, I will tell you to take a picture of that. And I need you to take a picture of it. And now you have all the info. It's all right there. That has produced students that when I see them again, they are a different human. They're not the same person. They're a different shooter. So literally writing that down. Now, I know a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to take notes. Have you ever looked at a student's notebook at the end of class?
Me personally?
Yeah. It's
That's not something I know.
It's fascinating. I tell other instructors, you should look like it. We got to be like, not like in a derogatory way, like, hey man, I noticed you were taking notes all day. Yeah. Can I read your notes? And I'm asking to read them because I might learn something from it. And they'll give me, they show me their notebook, and I'm telling you this, any cop, you used to be a cop, you'll know what I'm about to say. A student writing notes down on paper, the majority of time is the equivalent of an eyewitness statement to a cop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's early.
It's crazy because I'll look at it and I'll be like, hey, right here, you wrote this. He's like, yeah, that's what you said. And I'm like, that is not what I said. I never said grab your rifle by the magwell. That 100%, I can assure you, I never said that. You know what I mean? In fact, the guys are getting in their cars and I'm like, hey, everybody come back over here. I'm like, did I ever tell you guys that? They're like, no, you said actually never do that. You know what I mean? And the point being is like, and I do that in a way where I'm not calling the student out, right? But the first time I did that, I'm like, holy shit, they're actually writing something down. Now, when you look at this on its face, you're talking, and like this in itself is an interesting piece, because if you are on the East Coast of the US and the range does face the ocean, right? If you're on the beach or whatever, and the sun's coming up in their face, you need to be talking to them and turning them around so that the instructor's facing the sun.
Yeah.
So they can see you, because if they can't see you, they can't hear as well. That's scientifically proven. Okay. But now every time he writes down, this is what he does. He's looking at you and he's like, and then he goes, well, I haven't quit talking because you're writing. Right?
Yeah.
And no human can write. So it's just a fascinating thing. So I've always written the stuff down. I post the combatives things up all the time. When we do combatives, and I post them up, I tag you, I tag everybody, right? And I'll post the shooting ones up every once in a while as well. Usually the reason everybody goes, why don't you put the one for shooting up? And I'm like, usually because I forget. is, combat. When we do combatives, we're doing it around like not the shooting area, and the target, like
Yeah.
it's either, if I'm in my truck, it's on my tailgate, or it's like stapled to the overhang. And then when we're doing shooting, the shooting is done. I'm teaching in front of the targets, and what ends up happening is we clean up and we end up throwing the target away, and I'm like, damn it, I forgot again. And I forget every time. So I'll try to start making an effort to do that. But when you post that, they take a picture of it. And now I will say this, it's all shorthand, but it's shorthand that I went over. So when they look at that, they're going to go, I remember that. I remember what he said about that. That is the best way to do what you're asking.
Yeah.
Now the video thing, a lot of guys are like, why don't you just video the whole class? And I'm like, well, because I don't have anybody to video the whole class. I mean, I just don't have that, I don't live that life.
Yeah.
I don't know, would I ever, if I was a student, would I watch? There's no way I would watch a video that long. I'd be like, man, that's like, hopefully guys watch this video, but I mean, I don't know. We've been going for 2 hours. But I don't have the attention span for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those are the ways to do that. I mean, I think that's a really good way to do it. And then I review constantly. I will review so that whiteboard that I'm talking about, I don't just review it at the end. I review it as we go through. Greatest hits, over and over and over and over. And then at the end of the day, I go, hey guys, if you were going to train me, what's the first thing you would do? And I'll have them to where they're not looking at that board. And most 90% of them can rat it off just like that,
Yeah.
And so those are some things that, like, if you want to steal time back from the class, that's a damn good way to do it, because and that's why a lot of people, I mean, if you look at what we did with the Wolf in class, so I had Wolf, Dave Russian, I had Jarrett Landry, and Steve Demko, all SAC guys in class. If you look at that, because the Wolf is there, we did 4 hours and 15 minutes of combatives on day 2.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people would go, dude, that's way too much. We still shot 500 rounds.
That's awesome.
And got done at 4:15. And everybody's out of ammo, so it doesn't matter. Everybody's out of ammo.
Yeah.
So you can, if you do these things, you can steal the time back from the class, and give them more. You know what I mean? Because that's what they paid for, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I've never once looked at a student's notebook. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'd be very, I mean, now that you mentioned it, I'd be very curious to see, how they're retaining it as far as what they're writing to remember it. Is it accurate, or is there something that they're picking up on that I'm completely overlooking?
Right.
Where would you say that you see either students or teachers, coaches, overcomplicating things unnecessarily?
Trigger. Are you talking about shooting specifically?
When you're teaching, when you're running your courses, what's something that you see in, other coaches, other students, just like, dude, you're making more of this than it needs to be?
Trigger, 100%. It doesn't even have a close second place. It's 100% trigger. It is the deal about guys making trigger a fundamental that is worthy of longer than the timer shutoff discussion is incorrect. Do you know what I mean by the timer shutoff discussion?
Yeah.
So, like, I have my timer. Here's another trick for instructors. The timers, like, I think the new Kestrel, which is what I would suggest everybody use, I believe it has a 10-minute auto shutoff. And that one you might can change, but I think factory is 10 minutes. All the pack timers and all those were all like 10 minutes. If you're an instructor and you look down at your timer and you have to turn it back on, you are incorrect. Just like right there. But that's free advice for everybody. But the trigger thing is like mind-boggling to me. Now a lot of guys will say, so you don't teach trigger? No, I teach it, but the only thing that needs to be taught about trigger is your trigger finger speed should be commensurate with the target distance and difficulty for you.
Yeah.
So I think one of the problems, like if you look, like I'll tell you today, the crew I had today, it's a military crew, and we ended with the 100-yard speed bowl, which is like, I don't know what test number that is, but standing to prone. So beep, standing to prone, 10 rounds under 12 seconds from 100 yards away, and you got to score a 90 or better. It's a very difficult drill. It's a difficult drill because, the hardest manipulation in shooting is going standing to prone with a rifle. There's no other manipulation that's harder. The draw stroke's not harder, and nothing else is hard. Reload's not harder. It's the hardest manipulation in shooting. The vision required for that needs a significant amount of build-up training to be able to even remotely come to the zip code of doing that. Of course, you need to get 0. Okay, so like my point is this. We are all shooting the same gun. Like contractually, I have to do that. I can't go in there with a Geisley SSA. Like that's not what they're using. So, when I say that the trigger needs to be just trigger finger speed is all you need to worry about, dependent on target distance and difficulty and there's no way those guys, the first time doing this, are going to be pulling the trigger at the same speed as me. It's just not going to happen. So they have to, they're going to be a little bit slower. Not saying they might not make sub 12 seconds. I think 3 or 4 of them did. But, I pulled it off in like 10 flat. So
yeah,
I think that, so if I taught trigger and I'm like, this is how much finger you put on the trigger. Put this much on there. Middle of first pad or where the fuck people. Well, there was one guy who's like a Viking. I mean, he looks like a Viking. He's like 6'2". His hand, dude, his finger is like that long compared to mine. So if I tell him to put this much finger on the trigger, well, that's already, he can't do that. It's not possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how a lot of people teach trigger. I don't teach trigger. I don't teach trigger finger placement like that. I teach trigger finger placement in shooting a certain split at a certain distance to begin, and then like don't ever change it. That's how much finger you need on the trigger. Okay, the next thing is like trigger finger speed. Well, trigger finger speed, based on the target distance and difficulty, is directly related to your experience level with vision. And it doesn't matter whatever your experience was before you came to see me. I don't know what that is, but I can tell by watching you shoot and seeing what your target looks like. So I think the amount of time that I see people, and like I see people like put it on their Instagram and they're like, trigger is the most important fundamental. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, no, like big negative. In fact, I would tell you that, in Idaho, I hit an 11:01 hit factor, running the 5 to 20 drill, running bills from 5 to 20 yards from concealment. It's all on video. One of the guys filmed it. 11:01 hit factor with a 3.5-inch freaking barreled pistol buried in my pants. I was bouncing my fingernail off the inside of the trigger guard the entire time from 5 to 20 yards. So, I mean, like, how can you say that trigger's that important? I was molesting the trigger for all 24 shots.
Right.
So if that in itself is so detrimental. What it does is any shooter that goes down that road, that whole trigger's important, like it's my life. Like, here's another one for you. How many times have you heard this on the range? Like, I missed that because I jerked the trigger. Trigger jerk.
Yeah.
What does that even, like, how do you jerk a trigger? What does that mean? Like, what? Like, maybe this is what you mean, sir. Maybe your trigger finger speed was too fast for your experience level and the target distance and difficulty. And because of that, your vision can't keep up. That's probably what you meant to say. Or maybe you didn't have enough finger on the trigger and you're not strong enough to actually pull the bone stock Glock trigger that fast, because it's got an inch and some change of trigger travel. Or maybe you pinned the trigger to the rear because you were shooting a rifle in the prone, and by the time everyone on the line heard the clunk of the reset, me and everybody else had already shot 4 rounds. Maybe that's what you mean by trigger jerk. But trigger jerk's not a thing. It's not real. But people will just say it and like, that's why I missed. I'm like, that's not why you missed, man. In fact, most people that say they missed by trigger jerk, well, the reason they really missed is they didn't have a good connection with the rifle in their shoulder. With a pistol, they moved their wrists. So I think that is it's just a horrible thing that it retards people. Again, the engine is retarded, and that person hits a plateau of shooting performance, and they end up staying on that plateau for a very, very, very long time. And eventually what most people do is they end up trying to buy their way out of that. I'm going to get a lighter trigger. I'm going to get this gun. I'm going to, whatever. And it's never going to work. None of it's going to help.
Yeah. Well, the performance enhancers were just masked, right? It just masks the deficiency. That's actually the root cause.
Yeah.
Kyle, one last thing on the training side. If someone listening is serious about getting better, like actually getting more capable, more skilled, what should they be looking for in a coach?
Now here I would have to say it's going to depend on what are you trying to get skilled on? So, like, for example, if guys are wanting to do better at competition, I would go to a guy I would go to a competition prep type class. Mm-hmm. Because, part of that game is the game itself, right? I mean, standing on a line and shooting is not running a stage. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Now, if you're trying to get better at concealed carry, then I would go to a guy who's a low vis type dude, and that's what he does.
Right.
Now, the shooting for both of those should look the same. The actual shooting performance should look the same. But things that the combatives guy is probably going to do, or the low vis guy is going to do, is combatives. That makes sense because that's part of that game. Things that the competition guy is going to do would be the movement of a stage, because that's that game. But the shooting pieces should look the same. So I think if you choose wisely, how do you choose wisely? I think word of mouth is probably the best way. I don't know that I would depend 100% on the internet, because even back in the day, when we were at Blackwater and, we heard that this internet was coming, like, everybody's like, there's this thing and people are going to be able to like post about the class and what, even back then, like the early days, painfully obvious that people they've got like their second account that they're posting on their own shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know that I would depend on internet reviews all the time. I would depend on somebody That's what I would depend on. And I would say if you don't, you're like, I don't know anybody that like, then I would pick somebody like based off what you're seeing that they do. But again, that obviously can be faked nowadays. But I think like I put pictures of the targets. I put, videos of me shooting, blah, blah. Hey, I want to be able to do that. That's what I'm looking for, but it's concealed or whatever, I do understand, and I tell students in every class, I think your position is very difficult right now because, of all the internet personalities and all the, let's just be honest, if you get enough clicks on that one post, you're going to get paid by Instagram or Facebook, right?
Right.
I get a check from Facebook, but it's only like $17 a month. And I never asked for it. They're just like, the only reason you're getting it is because you've been here since we started. Literally, that's what it says.
That's wild.
I cannot delete my own Facebook page. They won't let me. But you know what I mean? Some guys get paid for this stuff, right? They get paid for the clicks or whatever. I don't get paid for the clicks. I just think it's fascinating, the whole thing. But I do think it's difficult as a consumer to make a choice. Maybe interviews like this, maybe you listen to a guy. If I was going to spend $750, I'd be like, let me hear this guy talk,
Yeah.
And maybe just, 11 minutes ago, somebody goes, well, trigger is the most important thing. I'm never going to train with that guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Rock on, sir. But I think most people, I think if, once again, this is part of that awareness circle in the readiness formula. Part of that is research. You got to figure this out, man. You got to do it. We have all chosen poorly, like in Indiana Jones, when they're trying to get the cup of Christ, right? And the one guy drinks from it and the old knight is like, you've chosen poorly. We've all been there. I've done it.
Yeah.
Not in a shooting class, but in other stuff that I'm interested in. And you're just like, oh God, So I think it's tough, man, but do your research, talk to people. Contact the guy, I have people email me all the time. They're like, I would like to come train with you, but I don't feel comfortable with it. And I'm like, I'm at this point, like what we were saying, earlier, I'll just be like, hey, email me your phone number, dude. I'll just call you. Call the guy up, and I'm like, okay, what? Because this is untypable, right? And I'm not going to sit on my phone all day. And I'll be like, okay, so what don't you feel comfortable about? He tells me, or the guy's like, I can tell by talking to the guy, I'm like, you're safe enough to come to class. I will make you better. See you there, So.
Yeah. All right. So I want to touch on something briefly that comes up a lot these days, and that is the subject of nicotine. There's a growing body of research around nicotine and its cognitive effects, specifically its ability to increase focus, alertness, and reaction time in the short term. We've personally found benefit in using it responsibly in the right context. So for myself and the rest of the team at AHT, if we're going to use something, we just want it to be clean, consistent, and controlled. And for us, that's where Zimmo comes in. So if you are already in that lane, kind of already tracking on this, or at least considering it, you can support those who support us by going to zimmopouches.com and check out what they have to offer. If you decide you want to make a purchase, feel free to use our partnership code at the checkout. Partnership code is AHT20. That's AHT20, and it'll save you 20% on checkout. So we appreciate you guys. Thanks. That's good advice. There's so much out there. So, you hit on it, right? Like expectations versus reality.
Yeah.
I want to start talking about something, transition out of the training stuff and try to move into the family side of the house, because the vast majority of our following is young men. And a lot of what we talked about from the beginning of this episode, the standards, time investment, the responsibility, the pressure, right? That doesn't just stay within our respective fields of work, right? Whatever we choose that whatever path we choose, we're going to walk. At some point, it ends up showing up at home. right? As a husband, as a father, those responsibilities bring on potentially different kind of leadership. Over the years, how have the lessons that you've learned about discipline and responsibility essentially influenced the way you approach leadership at home?
The easy answer would be never quit. That would be the easy answer. That's probably a little bit of a cop out blanket statement, but divorce rates are pretty high right now, right? Why is that? Did they have unrealistic expectations going into it because they watch TV or whatever? I don't know. I don't know what the answers are. When I say never quit, I mean I like it when I see these quotes of like, it's like an inner city guy, and it's he's like, everybody's got shit,
Right.
and that's very true. I don't think there's any family that doesn't have something they're dealing with. So I mean, everything has got it. The easy route is always to make the problem go away. How can I make the problem go away? Well, I'll go away from the problem. There you go. I solved the problem.
Yeah.
I think that's a very generalistic attitude you should have. Especially if it's, when you talk about family, I think you got to talk about the beginning of family. And the beginning of family is generally you getting married.
Yeah.
So, I would say it is nice to have a formula to fall back on, to say, I married her because of this, that, and this, not just because she's just this smoking hot Italian chick. That's my wife, by the way. She's she'll never. There's no way she's going 2 hours and 30 minutes, so she'll never see this.
We'll cut out this one part and just snip it.
I think that it would be nice to do that before you do have a relationship with someone. And then I think when it comes to a marriage vow, here's the best way I can tell people, like, and I've told my son this, and my son is just, as I tell people, my son is my hero, for a bunch of reasons. But one of the things I told him one day, I said, look, you need to understand something. And this is when he's very young, or, in high school, old enough to understand.
Yeah.
Your word is your honor. That is part of your honor, right?
Yeah.
And your honor, interestingly enough, can never be taken from you. No one can produce a situation in life where your honor was taken. You can give it away, and a lot of people do give it away. So if you're going to get married, you're making a vow and you're giving your word and your honor. And so, again, it's nice to have a formula to bounce these decisions off of before that happens. But I think you should seriously look at that. One of the things I do nowadays is I meet people. I have this great, job of where I meet people all over the country. And, I meet these people that have been married 50 years, 60 years, 65 years, right? And I tell you, man, I talk to them. And, I ask the same thing. I'm like, hey, talk to me about marriage, man. And, you hear the same reoccurring theme with these people that have been together for so long. And that reoccurring theme is, listen to what your partner is saying. Communication, right? Communication is a big thing. And I know a lot of people will say something like happy wife, happy life. And there might be a smidge of truth to that, but you need to be happy too, you know?
Yeah.
So I think, open and honest communication is the number one thing. I think you should always talk about problems. And I've definitely not been the best at that in my life because I come from an area to where you don't say anything. And then you think about when I came in the military at such a young age, suffer in silence is the mantra. No one wants to hear you bitch about how cold or how hurt you are. It doesn't matter, and it's very difficult when you get out of the military at age, you go in at 17 or 18 and you get out at 29 and, so I think that the two people have to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. And you have to respect what the other person says, even though you might not like it. I would treat it a lot like the team in this aspect. Where I come from in the military, it's never about you. Now maybe the first part of my military experience, there is that, but the second part of my military experience, it's always about your buddy. It's about your buddy, and it's about that command. That's the number one. And so if you treat a marriage the same way, make it about the other person and make it about the household as a whole. I think that is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And then talk about problems when they come up, Now, I'm not saying that, obviously there are people that get married and it's oil and water and they should have never gotten married. And that does happen. But again, there goes back to that formula. And there goes back to the awareness and thinking about this thing so you can prepare yourself for it. What I have found in when I was a kid, religion was a decently big thing, Southern Baptist. And we, as a family, have probably, for the last 15 years or so, we've gotten back into the church. And
It's awesome.
that is that's a great thing. And again, some people might be like, religion doesn't have, a part in whatever, hey, you do you, man.
Yeah.
But, there's a few billion people who would disagree with you. So,
Right.
I think a family with a good religious foundation now has one more pillar that they can lean on when things don't go well. And I think if you don't have that, your degree of success is probably not going to be very high. It's probably a pretty low percentage. When it comes to the kids, I mean, I would give anything to go back in time. I think I made a ton of mistakes with both of them. And, I say that they're both successful and everything, but like definitely we had bumps in the road, man. And when those bumps in the road happen, the thing is like how well, one of the things that I like about the SIOC thing is like, we are good at pressure. We pressure test everything. If you're so good at that, whatever that is in your world, and that might be that obsession of your job and you're so good at it, there's probably some traits from that you can apply to home life. Like how good are you and your wife when pressure happens? How good are you guys together? And I think a lot of people, especially men, need to drop the ego when it comes to parenting a lot. You can get into philosophical discussions about a wife's place and a man's place, and it's a modern world and yada, yada, yada. But a mother she is the caregiver. She is the nest builder. you need to respect that. As a man, you're the protector, in traditional roles. I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, um, so I think like, raising the kids, I have never seen a woman's intuition be wrong. Now, it could be that I've just not gotten those reps in, in our life. But typically speaking, once I learned to kind of listen to what she was saying, there's that communication piece again, respect what she's saying. And, I would say more often than not, when it comes to the care of the child, the woman probably has a God-given natural, whatever you want to call it, thing in her that we do not have. And I think that's huge, man. With the kids, I think, you are essentially shaping a little human from the word go. And so
Right.
all those things that we talked about, I think, having God in the equation for a child at a very young age is a huge thing, Um,
Yeah.
it's I guess there are books written on it, but I mean, some of them I've read a couple of them and I'm like, well, it didn't really tell me anything. It told me a bunch of stories. You know what I mean? It's like going
Yeah.
to watch a GWAT special operations guy tell you about his firefight in Iraq. And I'm like, I don't know what you learned about leadership from that, but all it was a story. It didn't really tell me anything. But I think those open lines of communication, mutual respect, honoring your word, and then, just listening to your partner and what they say. And then when you have a disagreement, whoever ends up being wrong, the other person needs to be able to have not enough ego to say, yep, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So Kyle, there's two things you specifically mentioned. I kind of want to just, if you're willing to talk about it deeper, you keep bringing up a formula in relevance to, taking on this covenantal relationship, marriage, right? Starting a family, starting a tribe. Can you speak more to the actual formula you're referencing?
well, I would say, again, awareness, right? You get married. I mean, what have you ever, are you aware, like, what if your partner gets sick? What if they get a terminal disease? Are you willing to take care of them? What if, what if they became a paraplegic? Is that the person that you love so much that you're aware that this could happen? You're willing to do that. And then do you have any preparation for that? Mentally, mental preparation. That's the formula I'm referring to. Are there do you have any frozen lakes that could affect this relationship? Maybe that's you travel all the time. I travel all the time,
Yeah.
If you're a guy who can't, control your desires, if you're not aware of that, then maybe you need to be. Maybe that might change your willingness. And hey, I know guys like this. I know good men I served with who are like, I can't get married. It's never happening. And I'm like, hey, dude, you're the guy. Yeah, I mean, great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know guys like that. I don't think they're a bad person at all. They it's not for me. I'm not doing it. I can't keep my pants up. It's just not the way I'm built. But at least he has gone through that, and you know what I mean? Instead of causing this mass chaos, because when you look at a lot of the problems we have with young people, it is a broken home. That is a major piece of it. And that broken home, I mean, it is like a high percentage that it's the woman who's taking care of them. The man's gone. And men who don't have a man in the house, you should look up the statistics on this about the levels of failure that will happen in life. It is mind-boggling. So I think like that's what you should do. And listen, some people might not get married until they're, 30 years old. I didn't get married till I was 29 or 30. 29. Yeah. 28, 29. So like 22, 23 years now.
Yeah.
I was not, I'll tell you this. I know I was not a guy who could have gotten married early to mid 20s. There's no way.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not have these formulas back then, but I was self-aware enough to be honest. I'm not there yet. I'm still wide open throttle.
Yeah. When you look at it, right, like you're talking about the readiness formula, SAC readiness formula, and you look at that awareness piece. I think what's interesting about it is that as time grows, as our awareness grows, as we become aware of new information, the component of how the cycle resets.
Oh yeah.
Like you gain a new piece of awareness. It's like, okay, you got to go back through it. Are you willing, right? Like, are you aware? If you are aware of this new piece of information that you weren't necessarily aware of, again, it just starts back over. Where's your willingness for that?
Yeah.
Right? Highlight that, define it. And then what are you doing to be prepared for it? Are you working, like, what do you need to be prepared for it? Or then are you actively doing that? Because our performance in any aspect of life ultimately parallels our preparation prior to.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Kyle, what are some of the things that, characteristic traits, right? Like we talked about your upraising and some of your characteristics and qualities that were instilled in you. What do you think are important characteristics that need to be instilled in our kids?
I think respect for others is huge. And that is one thing that I thank the military for, especially where I came from in the world.
Yeah.
You learn very quickly that where I'm from in the military, we don't care what color you are, and it's all about performance, baby.
Right.
I think when I was in training, I thought that, and I don't know if it was done. I would love to talk to some of those guys, and some of them have passed, and some of them are very old now. I would love to talk to some of those guys if it was done subconsciously or if it was done on purpose, meaning like, I'll never forget I had to do a beach run one day with a guy from New York who was mixed race. And I mean, they did it on purpose. There's the Southern kid and there's the kid from the Bronx. Like, you guys are going to hold hands and run down the beach. And you're like, this is very embarrassing. You know what I mean? And like, you do stuff like that. I think anybody that served in the military that's gone through some suck, it doesn't really matter what part of the military, you end up leaving the military and you have a higher respect for all people,
Yeah.
And in our case, you get a little bit of wartime and, the guy who is, supplying your food at the chow hall in Bagram, because you've been living out of a rucksack for the past three months, you will pay that guy all the respect in the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. I think the military does a good job. I assume the military still does a good job of that. I obviously don't know. But I think that that's very important for children to learn respect for others. I also think the children, like I said earlier, there needs to be a mechanism for them to learn hardship. And sports is the easiest. That's the easiest push button for that. I think that having a child understand at a very young age, there's something bigger and greater than them, and religion is, again, it's the easy button for that. Now, as they get older, the thing that's bigger than them can be that, hey, that's fine that you won the race. Wait at the finish line for the rest of your team to get done. That's fine that your events are over. Stay on the field and cheer the other people on until their stuff is over. I think those are very, as cliche as it is, do unto others, right? I mean,
Yeah.
We've been told it since we were children, but I think that's a very applicable thing for kids nowadays.
Sure. For sure. As your kids have gotten older, what, if anything, what has potentially changed in how you think about being a father?
Oh, well, I'm a grandfather now too, so
Congrats on that.
yeah, thank you. You never stop worrying about them. I mean, that's my mom told me that when I was younger, and of course it went one ear and out the other. I think back on it now, and I'm like, my God, the stuff I put my mother through. You know what I mean? It's like insane, and my dad too, and like,
Yeah.
I'd call my dad when cell phones came out before we were getting on the bird to go jump. Like, I'm like, I should have never done that, right? Just driving me crazy. I don't know. What's changed is, I mean, you still worry about them, but once you start seeing that they get the skills to handle these issues, you start feeling a little bit more comfortable with it. I would say the worries change,
Yeah.
Am I worried about them drinking and driving now? No, I'm not worried about that anymore. I'm worried about them getting hit by somebody that's drunk, so I might,
Yeah.
the worries are all, I think they're in line with where they are in life. I'm worried about my son getting good grades, right? Because he's still in college.
Yeah.
I'm worried about my daughter not working so much that, doing what I've been guilty of, working to provide, and you're working so much you're not here,
Yeah.
So I think the worries never change. Or I'm saying the worries, they change. What you're worried about changes, but the actual worrying never changes. It's always constant,
Yeah. If you were to look back on it now, what lessons would you say about fatherhood have proven most important to you, like over time?
I think with young boys, you need to tell them how proud you are of them when you are proud. I don't think that is a thing a lot of men are willing to do because it might look like weakness in their mind. I think, you need to give your son a hug every once in a while. I hug my son every time I see him, and he's like, because he's like a Viking too. He looks like one. He's a big, blonde, muscled up, Viking looking dude. I got the shaft on all that, by the way. I don't know how I ended up at 5'9". Everybody in my family is like 6 foot tall. But, I think, you need to show a boy love, which is hard for some men. You need to tell him you're proud of him. And you need to get across to him things that, men are responsible for and should be responsible for. One of the things that I don't think a lot of people talk about is like, I'm not telling everybody like, it may be a little extreme. Do you need to teach your kids how to fight? I don't know that you need to. I think there should be a degree of it. I think, again, if you look at wrestling, that's a great start. You look at any of the combative sports, put a kid in BJJ, because the thing is, if you teach them that in a training environment, they're less likely to do it for real.
Right.
But if it came down to something, they can actually deliver. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's a huge thing that
Yeah.
a lot of men don't do. I think generationally, probably the generation behind me, maybe, that's not something that, is done.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty important. I think for girls, you need to, you need to always look at your daughter, and the same thing, she needs to hear that, you're proud of her, that she's beautiful, because those are the things that girls have the pressures on them in the real world,
Right.
They need to know that there's a male figure that honestly believes that they are, the most beautiful thing there is, um,
Agree.
that's a very hard thing for young women right now to do, especially with the internet. My God, I would hate to have a daughter, a teenage daughter right now. That's a tough road.
Sure.
She needs to feel good about herself, and coming from the dad, that means everything, It doesn't mean as much coming from the mother.
Right.
But the mother has to have the relationship between a mother and a son is a very special relationship, and that is a very nurturing, thing. As my mom says, you always need your mom.
Yeah.
And she would definitely will not watch 2 hours and 54 minutes into this. She's been right the entire time. You know what I mean? Whether it's, advice on buying a house or refinance or whatever it might be, or, you're having a parenting problem and you're like, what in the hell are we going to do? Who do you call? Well, you don't call your banker. You don't call your insurance agent. You're not calling your combative partner. Your first person you're going to call is your mother. You'll be like, hey, did I do this? It's like, absolutely you did. You don't remember? And you know what I mean? So I think those are the things that come to mind right now. I mean,
Yeah.
For us at least here.
For sure. Kyle, as one begins to mature, they begin to think less about, like, actually mature. They begin to think less about their own accomplishments and more about, like, what continues after them, right? The people they've trained, the standards they've helped build, the culture they've helped shape. Obviously, goes without saying, the family that they raised or failed to, right? We start looking back on life. I want to talk about that bigger picture. So, like, for you, when you think about, like, the impact that your influences had on people that you've had influence over, what do you think has mattered most to you?
Simply in every aspect, whether it's my son, my daughter, the people I've trained, did I make you more capable? I think that would sum it up. Did I make you more capable as a man? Did I make you more capable as a young mother? Did I make you more capable as a shooter or a combative guy? That would be the one thing. If everybody said, yep, I'd be like, man, sayonara, dude. Job, mission complete. MC, mission complete.
Yeah. What for the young professionals that are listening to us talk right now, what principle or principles would you most want them to carry with them moving forward after having listened to this?
I would say you know, don't be concerned with you.
Yeah.
Be concerned with the people around you that you care about. And if you do that and you do the best you can to make those people more capable in whatever your gig is, that's you will get fulfillment out of that, and you will get success out of that.
Yeah.
You know, obviously I am not a big social media guy. You know, I've got probably less followers than anybody in this industry, but, you know, knock on wood, classes sell out every time.
Yeah.
So I think that is, I assume I'm not just lucky there. I mean, I'm not that dumb. But I'm not so egotistical either to think that, like, you know, it's the end all be all. It can be, if you have any degree of success in anything, it can be very easy to take a different path.
Yeah.
And, especially now that, you know, being sober, clarity obviously is something that I probably haven't seen for the last 30 years. You know, I just don't have a concern with me. I just don't really, I'm not worried about like Kyle doing this or being remembered for that or any of that kind of shit. I'm more like, are the kids set up for success in their life? Is my wife happy with what we've done in that aspect? And is, you know, she happy with me? And, you know, that's what I'm concerned with. I mean, I think most people probably can't, in this day and time, I can see for a young person.
Yeah.
How what I'm saying is almost the opposite of what you're being shown. I can see that. So I would suggest to people, why don't you just try it for 6 months, see how it goes. Try it for a year. I mean, trying it for a day ain't gonna do shit. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
give it a good go. Don't concern yourself with anything but the people around you, your tribe. Make your tribe better. And I think you would be astonished at how well things work out.
Yeah. One of the things you've been known to talk about is dying well, right? Like guys see that when you go through your discussions. What does it mean to die well? And I was going to ask you, what does a life well lived look like to you? But it sounds like you kind of just answered that.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, you know, probably at some point in your life, you do need to think about what's going to be written in the obituary, you know? How many people are going to come to your funeral? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But nobody's coming to mine because I'm not going to have one. So it's written in my
There we
will. I'm gonna do a Roy Bohm. I'm just gonna slide on out. But I think that would be, you know, that's something that's your legacy. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you know, there's a very old saying, and I don't know exactly where it came from. I think there's a little controversy on where it came from. But you know, people say, hey, you know, you have two deaths. You have the physical death when you die, but as long as your name is mentioned, you never really die. And you and I know a ton of people that have been dead for, you know, 15 or 20 years, and we still talk about their names. We still mention their name. Well, that should tell you something about that individual. So that's what I think, you know, is the most important.
Yeah. So yeah, that's awesome, man. It's deep. Kyle, man, is there anything that you want to touch on that we haven't touched on?
I think this has been great. I think this is a great format, a great podcast you're doing here, because this is probably a needed thing. It's probably a missing link. Because, obviously we got to talk about a little bit of the military thing, because that's a big hunk of my life. A solid 10, 11 years, but, it's a minor part. It's a small part of it in the big cog. Right. But it's refreshing to have something like this where we go a little bit deeper into some stuff that, if people have an interest in it, I think, I hope that, I've been able to spread some kind of wealth to you. It's better than talking about, I think we've all had enough of the, I did this, that, the other thing, and talking about, like, the heavy stuff that is training. This is nice. I think it's so big congrats to you for coming up with this idea. I cannot wait to see them. So I'm super stoked about this, man.
Same.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. It's my honor, honestly. Kyle, before we wrap up, dude, if people want to connect with your work, train with you, where's the best spot for them to go and see what you're doing and link up with you?
I post on Instagram every day ish. If they Google my name, they're going to get probably way more stuff than they're ever going to want to look at. But it's Defoor Proformance. Proformance is just a word I made up about 20 years ago. Well, not quite 20 years ago, 19 years ago. That's the Instagram. It goes to Facebook. It goes to X, even though nobody in our world really uses X. And then I still have a Tumblr account as the backup to the backup to the backup. So yeah, and the YouTube, there's all kinds of training stuff on there. So yeah, it'll be easy to find me. I'm not the I'm not the lawyer from, I think there's another Kyle Defoor. It might be a politician or something. I don't know. Obviously, you know what I look like, so it won't be very hard.
We're going to add all that stuff.
Actually, you might not know what I look like, because I usually have his hat and sunglasses on because I'm out in the sun. But
I was going to say, they may not.
The first time people see my face, I'm like Maynard from Tool. You're like, oh, that's what that dude looks like.
We'll add all your links and connections in the show links and whatnot. But
I appreciate
it. I just want to tell you, I appreciate you, man. Like, appreciate your willingness to take the time and sit down and have this conversation. I think conversations like this really matter beyond the stuff we typically talk about in regards to like what we train on, because they show that standards and, whether it's training or leadership or life, that they're not just accidental, right?
Right.
They're built intentionally over time with discipline, responsibility, and, doing things the right way. And I think anyone listening can hear that in the path that you've walked. So I appreciate your willingness to share that with us, man. It means a lot.
My pleasure.
To everyone listening.
Thank
you, brothers. To everyone listening. Go ahead.
I hope it helps somebody out. That would be the thing. If this helps one person out, that's worth it. That was worth 3 hours of my time, because I'm doing nothing but sitting here anyway. So
appreciate you, man. For those listening, I appreciate you spending time listening to us. If you've got something out of today's conversation, Kyle, if you have somebody that needs to hear it, definitely share it with them. And until next time, just stay dangerous.